United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Got to mute there.
There you go. I was very careful to make sure I had everything muted when I turned it on.
Okay, we got a very busy agenda today. We're going to start with Theo Lombardo is here from Lombardo Associates. Joe, where's Joe?
He was just here. He was. Here he is.
I'm referencing you and you're not here.
Could have sang happy birthday, Joe. Birthday was yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Young man, just big 3-5.
So what we hope to do is over the next 3 weeks, continue the discussion on the wastewater plant. Today, Lombardo Associates are going to make their addendums to their reports and explain exactly what they did. Joe, before we start that, we'll go over the time frame of the next 3 weeks, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, and welcome everyone. This is the next phase in understanding. The work that's being presented here today is the first material I presented over the next 3 weeks of meetings. Today, Pio Lombardo from Lombardo Associates is going to demonstrate subsequent analyses and modeling that picked up right where the last engineering report had left off. The objective of these analyses and modeling is to examine in the highest level of detail that we can the impact of the proposed wastewater system, the impact and implications of alternatives such as individual IA systems, and trying to help the community understand the benefits or disadvantages of each. So Pio's today going to go through a couple of different technical analyses that he did to look at impact to adjacent users, groundwater users, neighbors, institutional users like Sylvester Manor, and also take a closer look at what's happening with the existing conditions, which neighborhoods, which communities are most impacted by the situation we currently have, and how to best mitigate these issues moving forward. We talked briefly about the meetings over the next couple of weeks. Lombardo Associates will be presenting today. This issue will be an agenda item in next week's town board work session as well. That's supposed to be more of a follow-up dialogue for the board members and members of the community. I'll be the point person at that meeting to have sort of an open conversation if there's more questions that come up and to talk about next steps. And then 1 week after that will be a presentation by the Secret consultant, PW Grosser, who did a full environmental assessment, third-party environmental assessment as part of the state's process for environmental review for projects of this scale. So that's the 1, 2, 3 week program that we have in store for you over the next couple of weeks. I think that's it for me for now. Welcome, Pio. Thank you for coming again. And there you go. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, town board members, staff of the town, and the public that's here live and virtually. As Joe mentioned, what we've done is I'd like to dial back just a quick second just to provide context. We submitted an engineering report on the proposed project back August 15th of last year. And subsequent to that time, there was a series or a number of public comments that were submitted in public, both in writing and verbally. We attended and we've read all of those public comments and attended meetings that were held last fall, I believe, to hear and debate some of the issues that were raised. And starting in basically late December, we realized that the project needed two engineering, let me call them addendums, to address the issues that were raised in those public comment period. And one of them, as Joe mentioned, was regarding the consideration of individual systems in particular. There was strong voices that were made that that should be the preferred option. And then the other one was comments, concerns, let me say, bordering on allegations regarding impacts on water supply wells and irrigation wells. So, and on Gardner's Creek. So these two reports address those issues from an engineering perspective and present science, the data, and our professional opinion responding to those. And I'm here to make this information available to the town board and actually to the public. My understanding the reports are on the website, so anyone has access to them. And to answer any question that the board may have at this time, actually, so that they're fully informed on the details. So the first item on addendum 1 was to evaluate the individual on-site systems and small community options. And without getting into excessive details, I'm just going to try to present the key findings and their basis. So we looked and frankly prepared preliminary engineering designs for each parcel that, and these preliminary designs were even submitted, I'll get to this in a second, to private contractors to provide even pricing on. And the key issue that the design, preliminary design identified that there are 4 properties in particular in the study area that require setback variances. And now the library one is a modest one to property line. The key one is really this property because it would require significant reductions, not the least of which is the well separation of 150 feet would need to be reduced to 81 feet. So that would be, from an environmental public health perspective, that's, in my professional opinion, pretty significant, severe. And then the other ones, there was police department and the justice department court building, and that one has another 150-foot well to disposal system would need to be reduced to 75. Those two in particular are, in my opinion, is sufficient for saying you can't do it. Even though it may get permitted, but in my professional opinion, not wise to do. Okay, the next slide sort of summarizes the other issues. Again, we did the preliminary engineering sizing and layouts. Each one for each parcel, except the school. We didn't do the school because they presumably have their own design already completed, so there's no point in redoing that. We did issue a request for preliminary budget quotations to a number of vendors in the area. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say at least 4, if not 5. I touched something.
Yeah, can you blow it up a little too?
Here we go, we're back.
So anyway, we submitted the request for budget quotations to them. We received them all. And we have not done a complete scrub on them. But clearly the cost, the cost for doing the entire individual systems in the study area is going to, in my opinion, is going to be well over $1 million. Now, we keep. There we go. Okay, apologies for the technical difficulty. So, and but we have that information if the town's interested in an examination of it. The vendor spent, a number of them spent significant effort, so I think they're reasonably reliable information, but they would have to be adjusted for site conditions, the budgets, et cetera. There would be significant effort that would be required to, what we call, make them real for your town.
One point about the figure you just issued, $1 million for systems in addition to the school's independent system.
Yes, that's, and that's just my, gut professional reaction to the numbers that I saw. And again, there's a lot of work that would need to be done to make them real, whatever the right number is. So also as part of Addendum 1, we've provided support efforts associated with the secret analysis. And I'll just bulletize these. One of them was, presented the institutional structure that would be proposed. This is really to communicate with DEC and the health department. That's been an issue of, let me call it, discussion that the town has been continuing with the regulatory agency. We're looking at the operations building facade, presented information in the report on that. Our estimate of energy use would be about 1,500 kilowatt hours a month. We will include even investigating whether a solar canopy could be used over the treatment system to make, ideally, we'd love to see this be able to be net zero energy use. And then address questions about trees along Route 114. That requires that none be removed by DOT. So those are items that came up during the environmental review process that, again, we interacted with SECRA consultant in that regard. The next slide here presents a draft preliminary construction schedule, okay? Now, what it does here, this is what we call a heel-to-toe construction schedule. Everything is only done when everything prior to that activity has been completed versus multitasking. So, so this construction schedule suggests with a start of authorization to proceed on May 1, that's authorization for the actual formal design work, that actual installations there would happen, by, fall, let's say, September of 2025. Now, what we've done on this schedule is that no work would be done on Route 114 during the summer, okay? And this is a conservative schedule, if you will. Questions came up about what's potentially possible. And so we assembled this schedule. I'll go into this in detail. Is that how quickly could things get done? Now, the way basically design is going to take through the end of the fall. The next key activity is construction permitting. And each one of these vertical columns here is 2 months. So look at it that way. So we're saying that construction permitting should take within 4 months, and that bid period activities could occur during that time as well. And basically, the way that the town could proceed is you could select a contractor based upon preliminary drawings. And we've done that previously. And then any, let me call it, revisions can be easily addressed as a change order. And there's mechanisms in there that, contractor can't gouge the town for whatever. So that's easy fear to eliminate. The tree clearing at Manwaring Road can only occur between December and February. My understanding it's due to the bats. And I don't know all of the details there, but that's an environmental restriction. And then one could initiate, and this is one of the critical path activities that would need to be examined because of supply chain issues that we know exist, exacerbated in the past few years. One could do large equipment items, in particular the ones that have long procurement times. Not unreasonable to see 6 to 9 months requirement on certain kinds of equipment. Not as bad as it has been, but one should plan on that. So that could be done concurrently and sort of to get a jump started on things. And then actual construction could prospectively start in early, or let me say spring, summer of next year. Okay? Now, this assumes that the town has funding, its own funding, and that you're not restricted by any grants regarding how monies can be spent. There's in certain grants, there's restrictions on, so you can't spend any money without the permitting, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So, but this allows you to basically multitask. And what it says is that the wastewater treatment plant would start construction, could start in construction next, let's say, late spring, early summer. And that one's obviously shouldn't be as big of a concern because it's not on 114, and all of the work is going to be done on site. We estimated in response to the SECRA consultant that about 25 large trucks would be going to that site over a matter of 4 to 5 months. The big equipment that would be delivered. So you're looking at that level of truck traffic that would occur in that area. We've done this in Hampton Bays. It's not a big deal in terms of, traffic impact. Obviously, during the delivery it is, but they're not there for long, okay? Or they're off the road pretty quick.
And P.O., these are the types of impacts that the SECRA process is supposed to evaluate and will be included in the SECRA report.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And all I'm trying to do here is provide you a sense of magnitude. How large, these are the numbers that we provided to the SECRA consultant, and they're determining their impact. So just share with you both the numbers there. Under this, let me call it, accelerated condition, presumably by the end of 24, early 25, property connections could potentially be made. Okay? It's a no-nonsense schedule, and it's doable. We've done things like this prior. This is not a large project. So in terms of construction, contractors are going to want to get in and get out. That's the only thing, big business, So any event, so we provide that schedule to you to give, so you have a sense of how these things could unfold. And obviously, this is a decision the town board makes on which approach you take. Okay, addendum number 2. So the addendum number 1 is really more technical engineering, wastewater analysis. Addendum 2 is, let me call it more of the environmental impact issue. And what we did here is that we evaluated these 3 items. Evaluation of where's the current discharge going? Because that's one of the concerns we've had right at the beginning is, the current discharge is impacting water supply wells. There was many issues or comments that were made regarding prospective impacts on nearby water supply wells and the irrigation wells on Sylvester Manor proper. And then the third item was prospective impact on Gardeners Creek. So in the report, the report, I should mention, relies very, very heavily. All of the science basis, if you will, in the report is based upon the work done by the United States Geological Survey. These are the 3 references, documents, as well as software, computer programs that we have obtained and used, and the analysis uses for instance, the third bullet item is the mod flow. That's the gold standard in the industry, used by, all groundwater professionals that do this level of detail. And mod path is the technique that's used for what's called particle tracking. So that tells you where the water is going, so to speak. It's the particle, drop a particle of water into the ground, where's it go? So that's what these techniques are. And then the other reports, USGS completed this report that basically tells us what is the average groundwater discharge from every sub-watershed throughout Long Island, which is an invaluable information to have. So that's really what we gathered and worked with. And I should mention here that part of our project team on this and our hydrogeologist, professional hydrogeologist that has performed all this work independently is Tom Camporeri. And I'll go through his qualifications and experience, shortly. So that's really the basis of what we've done to determine impact of existing and prospective future conditions. Okay, so this slide illustrates, this is the updated groundwater contour lines on the island. And this is a update from what was even published back in 2014 in the town's water management plan. Information all comes from U.S. Geological Survey. And what it shows you here that the predominant wastewater, the predominant discharge location for wastewater discharges currently, in this building now in particular, is the Mamaroneck Creek. Okay, school as an example. The other buildings there, which is the fire district building, and then the courthouse, the police station, and the residential property, and the residential property sort of on the borderline there, go to Shelter Island Sound underneath the town's golf course, which, as I understand, is also, there's water supply wells over there. Now, so that's the, and I'll get into shortly, without getting lost in the weeds here, about how this was all actually computed and put together. But that's what the analysis, I want to get you the conclusions first, so we can go back. That's what it says is occurring currently. Now, this study area, being at the top of the watershed, these lines are not, let me call it, totally precise or accurate all the time, because groundwater conditions change. It's a dynamic balance. And as you can imagine, if you go from this building over to, let's say, the police station, all of a sudden you go to two different watersheds. Okay, so to me, that's, it's like to be at the top of a mountain with 5 different locations you can go by taking 5 steps. But any event, what I wanted to show here is on this next slide, what we did next is that we calculated the amount of nitrogen coming from the 8 project buildings that are going to Mamaroneck Creek and to the Shelter Island Sound. What the analysis shows, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on any of the details, but basically, under current conditions, the buildings are discharging 157 pounds per year to Shelter Island Sound, and then 922 pounds per year to Mamaroneck Creek. Okay, a total of a little over 1,100 pounds per year that are going out to the surface water bodies. The interesting part, or an interesting part, is that the discharge to Shelter Island Sound is likely to take over 100 years. Now, again, this is all based upon the modeling conclusions. The travel time to Mamaroneck Creek is approximately 33 years. Okay? Now, what we did was we then computed, okay, if the project gets implemented, what's the net reduction of groundwater nitrogen, or wastewater nitrogen that's being discharged to groundwater, per year? We're looking under these variety of conditions of which flow one looks at present or potential future. Round numbers, we're looking at 1,100 pounds per year of nitrogen that is going to be eliminated from being discharged to the groundwater. Okay, so that gives you a sense of quantitative, and in certain situations, people look at the cost per pound per year, but that's not applicable here. But it gives you a sense, again, of dimension. That's existing conditions. Now we'll look at what's the impact of the proposed 4,000 gallons per day discharge on neighboring wells. Now, the numbers you're going to see is between 4,000 and 8,000 gallons. So let me explain that first. The 8,000 gallons per day is the design flow of the proposed wastewater treatment system. Okay? In our experience and its practice, average flow is equal to 50% of design flow. Because you're not at, design flow is peak conditions, you're not at peak conditions all the time. So, and obviously the school is not in session all the time. It's, in session 5 days a week, not 7, et cetera. So that is the reason why you'll see 4,000 and 8,000. My professional opinion is that 4,000 is the right number to look at. The environmental consultant wants to use 8 as well, because in the secret world, they always look at maximum prospective conditions. So rather than debate the matter, we've included both of them. Okay, now what the slide shows is, what we did, I should mention here, Sylvester Manor provided us a map that identified the location of all their wells. They also provided, and all this information is in the report, they provided us a table on water use by well. Okay, by year. Okay, we requested them to provide us information on a monthly basis, especially for the irrigation wells. That request was not responded to. Okay.
So Pio, just so everybody understands, the previous slide was the center and where the water's going now.
Today.
This is 16 Manwaring Road.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, now we're looking at 16 Manwaring Road area. This is current, good question. What this slide shows you is, we've got a little color code here. Let's review that. The green particles are those wells that are deep. Now, when we say deep, all wells have what we call a screened interval and take water from a certain layer in the ground. And by the way, Sylvester Manor provided us information on their wells. So the green ones are the wells that are extracting water from a deep depth, whereas the blue ones are a more shallow depth. Okay? The red area is the proposed discharge at 4,000 gallons a day. This is the particle track map that shows for the wells where all the water is coming from. And so the blue ones, again, are the shallow wells. The one that I'm pointing to with the cursor, that's the good ground hog well. We've got a neighbor here on 14 Manwaring Road. And then the wells on Sylvester Manor, and they're all numbered according to their methodology, okay? And what it shows here is that wells pull in water from what we call an upgradient location, because water flows easier from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. It doesn't pull it from a lower elevation. So, and there's a report appendix that speaks to all the science on there in addendum number 2. But what it does show here is that whereas the discharge overlaps well number 1 and number 3. However, and I'll get into this in a section, but they overlap, but they do not intersect. Okay, and I'll explain that in a second. The important thing here is also time of travel from the 16 Manwaring Road. The model predicting is that it's going to take between 21 to 24 years for the water to reach Gardeners Creek. Okay? Now, when we looked at the 8,000 gallons per day discharge, the flow paths are very similar. Okay? So whether we use 4 or 8 for analytical purposes or impact result, it doesn't matter. We also looked at a third condition, because the other 2 conditions are under what's called steady state analysis, so it's constant. Frankly, you take the annual usage, you divide it by 365. We said, well, for the irrigation system, the more accurate analysis, even though hydrogeologists will debate the other, is that we said, no, look at only running the irrigation for 3 months, which means that well 5 is the well that is the highest draw by, and you'll see the numbers in a second, by Sylvester Miami. That's their most, let me call it, productive well that they use for irrigation. And you'll see the sort of spider-like lines there of where the water is coming to that well, okay? And it's cross gradient is the term that's used. It's cross gradient from the discharge. So they do not intersect. Now this next slide, excuse me, make sure. This next slide is the cross section of the well recharge. This is the beauty of ModFlow and part of tracking. It's wonderful that we can do this, get this analysis. This tells you the story that even though they overlap, they don't intersect. In other words, there's no impact. So you'll see here, for instance, wells 1, 3, and 4, and 1 and 3 were the ones of concern because they are overlapping. However, what you'll see here is that the vertical separation between 1 and 3 and the plume in each of these grid patterns is 20 feet. So we're looking at 60 plus feet elevation difference between water that's being withdrawn by 1 and 3 and where the plume is. That's the basis for saying they overlap, but they do not intersect. If they do not intersect, there's no impact. Okay, so that's the analysis and the basis and conclusion of the impact on adjacent wells. So the third item we looked at was, comments were made regarding impacts on Gardeners Creek. So the technique we used here is what's commonly used in total maximum daily load calculations, federally established procedures for 30 years plus. And we looked at the Gardeners Creek watershed. Again, all of this information on this part of the analysis comes from either comes from the USGS, and we integrated the town assessors database. And I'll show you how we did that and then what the result of that. So you see there the location of 16 Manwaring, and this is the Gardeners Creek watershed. It's number 181 in the USGS catalog. And there you can see Gardner's Creek is where all groundwater or all water that falls in this area ends up in Gardner's Creek. That's the definition of a watershed, okay? So any property in this area that discharges, that effluent is getting into Gardner's Creek, okay? So we then, subsequent to this, said, okay, let's do the calculations to see what is that loading occurring currently, as well as what would it be with the proposed system. So what we did was, first of all, we took this overlay map that identifies the boundaries of the watershed. We overlaid that over the town's GIS map, basically it's a tax map, if you will. And then for each one of the tax maps, we tied that parcel into the assessor's database, okay? So they're all linked, okay? And this table then presents a list of each property that's within the Gardner's Creek watershed, and there's a total of 54, okay? And we identified, this is all reproducible, or anybody can do this with readily available public information. And all of our assumptions are stated in the report with references, et cetera. So this says, okay, if most of the properties are residential, you'll see here, but there's some commercial. And we identified a nitrogen load to groundwater for each parcel. Calculations were based upon what the flow is and what the nitrogen concentration is. And you'll see that here. And, residential property, that's well established, 65 for effluent. And then, for restaurants, et cetera, it's going to be in the 85. And then for buildings like this, the effluent quality can be 150. And that's not unusual because there's very little else besides bathroom wastewater. Okay? So the sum of all of that says that the 72% of the nitrogen flow, 72% of the wastewater flow is from residential properties and the others non-residential. And these are the calculations in terms of nitrogen load to groundwater that basically is nitrogen loads to Gardner's Creek. Okay? So it says that 61% of the load is residential, and the total nitrogen load there is, round numbers, 2,000 pounds per year. Okay, so next question is, okay, what does that mean on the impact on Gardner's Creek? Okay, and the way that that is analyzed is that, okay, we look at the existing discharges to Gardner's Creek. Okay, so we just take that pounds per day, we reduce the discharge by 25% because there is 25% removal in the ground in the leaching pool area. So the net discharge to the groundwater is 75% of the wastewater load, and then just convert that to kilograms per day because that fits some other calculations we make. And then, so that's existing conditions. Easier number to think maybe is 2.4 kilograms per day is going to the groundwater in the Gardner's Creek watershed. Then what is 16-man wearing proposal going to do? Okay, we're looking at a flow here again, 4,000 gallons a day. Our expectation and what we've certified is that we're going to get down to 3. We'll get some soil reduction. Again, we use 25 just for placeholder. It's modest. And then we then calculate how many kilograms per year. I should have done kilograms per day as well so you compare, but if you divide that by 365, you'll see it's 0.00 something. Okay? It's really going to be like 0.0 3 or 4, 0.04, okay? Now, if you take them, the key thing here is the next item. So if we look at the discharge of the proposed facility, if we take that 12.5 and divided by, or the pounds per year, that'll be easier for you to follow. If you take the pounds per year, 27.4, and you divide that by 1964, it comes out to 1.4%. In other words, the proposed discharge is equal to 1.4% of what's going into the ground now. Okay? Or another way to say this is say the proposed discharge will add 1.4% nitrogen to what's going into the ground right now, if that was to happen. Okay? We then, on the right-hand side here, these are computations, okay, for a single-family residence, IA septic system, what is it discharge? Okay, and we look at pounds per day, it's 8.7 pounds per day. And there's our basis, 200 gallons per day, assuming 19 milligrams per liter, and assuming, the ground takes out 25%, that's what it's gonna come out to. Okay, if we took a single-family conventional system that exists today and convert that to an IA system, what is that impact going to be? Okay, it's a little different without getting into the weeds on that. We looked at a conventional system, but those are not legal anymore. That's for academic purposes. Okay, so again, to put it in context, basically, the proposed facility proposes to discharge 27 pounds per year. The current situation is discharging 1964. So that 1.4%. Okay, I hope that is relatively clear. Okay, so that's sort of the placeholder. All right, well, what's that mean in terms of impact on the creek? We don't have information on the creek in terms of flushing times. I don't think it even exists yet. However, so what the analysis looks at it this way. All groundwater, the creek is all groundwater. Okay, that's where all the water's coming from. The amount of water that falls on it from direct rain is incidental. Okay? So if we take what the rule is for what the quality of the creek needs to be and use that as our, let me call it, target that groundwater needs to be, because again, they're one and the same. Then, as you'll see here, we said, okay, all of these discharges, we're going to use 0.36 as the concentration that cannot be exceeded for water quality standards to be achieved. That number, plus or minus 0.1 at most, has been established from a large number of TMDL studies on Cape Cod and on Long Island. Okay, I've been involved in some of them, and that's a pretty well-established number in science. Okay, any sensitivity analysis would say, yeah, it's not worth it. So what it says, if we only look at what's existing conditions, excuse me, I should back up. What we did, that's a key number here, is, again, USGS publishes groundwater flow quantities from every watershed on Long Island. Okay? That's telling you how much is coming out of the groundwater. Okay? That's the amount of water that's frankly available for dilution. Okay? If you're the bathtub, your groundwater, the amount of water that's going out is the number that USGS says. Obviously, the amount that goes out is the amount that comes in. And they figured all that out. Okay? So if what's coming in is only that amount. That's your dilution. If you take the amount of waste nitrogen that you drop it into the groundwater, then that's the amount that you're gonna dilute it by on that annual basis, okay? So, in absent, frankly, this is a common technique that's used, for analytical purposes. And, but what it says is that, that existing conditions are basically 4 times over the maximum limit. In other words, if we take 0.36 as the requirement, wait a minute, you folks are 4 times that under current conditions. And that assumes on the 0.36 that there's no other sources of nitrogen except wastewater nitrogen. So that's that's very conservative, if you will. And that's not realistic. One would say, yeah, it's probably only 50%. Because there's irrigation, that's likely to be a significant factor. And then there's what we call benthic impacts, which is the bottom muds of the creek excretes nitrogen. So frankly, that's what Fresh Pond Project is all about. But in the muds, they're excreting phosphorus as well. So those are the factors that have to be taken into account. So to use this analysis is very conservative. Okay. Now, so that says, hey, present conditions, Paul goes right. If you remember the cartoon, that the current conditions are over the limit. Right? Then let's look at, okay, what would be the impact of 16 man-wearing roads discharge? Okay. And what those numbers come out to is, if you look use the average flow of 4,000 gallons a day, that says that the change in groundwater condition is going to be 0.02 milligrams per liter. Okay. So as a percent of the target, that's 6% of the target. And so it's not a zero impact, but it's 6% of the target. I'll mention it here because it's in the report, and I don't think I got into the slide. But the town has the option, and the project has the budget to go net zero nitrogen discharge by implementing IA technologies or whatever on other properties. So there's a way to knock this off to zero by, quote, having a community.
You're talking about other properties on the creek.
Within the watershed. And that would be, or frankly, and I looked at it in detail, is even using the permeable reactive barrier technique. We've done this over in Hampton Bays. What's the name of that road? Over on the west side of Gardeners Creek is a dirt road. Yeah. Right there, it's a perfect spot. Because it's shallow depth to groundwater. That means low construction price.
Yeah.
So that's another quote no-brainer. That would most likely push it over to make it net zero, or not net zero, net positive. So those are discretionary items that the board thinks of. So now, it's in the fine print here, but what's the implications of using half of that 0.36 would be to say that existing conditions are 7 times what they need to be, or they're over the limit 7 times. Okay? As well as it increases the impact of proposed discharge, as well. In my opinion, that's a wiser number to look at, but, we don't, it's better to give you a sense of these implications. In other words, something needs to be done. The existing conditions are serious cause of any water quality issues. So in summary on that, and the impact of the proposed discharge on Gardeners Creek, again, we said they exceed a factor of 4. A factor of 3, because if they're 400%, you'd subtract 1, because from that's the reason why it says factor of 3. In our opinion, at the end, if you really start using the 0.18, it really points to all wastewater discharges within the watershed should be less than 10 milligrams per liter, regardless of the proposed discharge. You know, in other words, for that creek to get restored to water quality standards, everybody's got to step up to the highest, possible system. And again, we see no impact. The science tells us there's no projected impact on water supply wells nearby or down gradient, because there's no interception of the proposed discharge on them. So that's my condensed version of the hydrogeology analysis, which is obviously very strong. But what I'd like to do, and I'll be quick, because I'd like to leave some time for questions on this. I would like to, and I might need help, is to run through the slides on the presentation of the hydrogeologist. And
Could you give us the little background on who you used?
yes, yeah, I got that bulletized there. Yeah. Sorry, I guess left it in the report. I'm sorry. Tom Cambereri is a hydrogeologist. He certified groundwater professional, and in Massachusetts is referred to as a licensed site professional. He can sign documents regarding permitting issues on certain
Can you
levels.
make it bigger on your screen so people have a better chance of reading?
I don't think you did.
Sorry.
That's better.
Here we go.
Yeah, this information is largely part of the analysis that you discussed as well.
Right. Yeah, so let me give you Tom's background. Tom formerly was, and for 30 years, was the lead hydrogeologist at the Cape Cod Commission and responsible for analytical work on the Cape Cod aquifers, the modeling work there, et cetera. He's retired from that and is a private consultant. He works for the town of Barnstable, dealing with PFOA and PFS issues from, frankly, fire training facility, et cetera. Worked for a number of communities on Cape Cod for high level, let me call it, hydrogeology. He's been an advisor to the town of Southampton for many years regarding impacts of golf courses on groundwater quality, where particular pesticide considerations. So he's familiar with the South Fork, and he's very familiar with groundwater analysis, and he's happy to provide further, vitae on them if there was any interest. Okay, but he's well known in the hydrogeology community, and Cape Cod is obviously a similar environment as Long Island. So this is the assignment that we provided to him, is basically, again, to look at the discharges at 16 Manwaring Road at 8,000 and 4,000 gallons a day, look at the wells adjacent to the property, and then the downgrading wells, those are the Sylvester Manor wells. And then the key thing was to evaluate the potential interactions of the private wells and the Sylvester Manor wells with the discharge. So that was his assignment in scope. His method was to, as we mentioned, using the USGS groundwater models. Now, the groundwater model that you get from USGS is on a very coarse grid. and it's 500 by 500 feet, okay? He basically made it more fine-tuned and created a 50 by 50 grid spacing. As an example, where do you put the well? So obviously, if you're putting it on a 500 by 500 grid, that's a big difference versus a 50 by 50. So we can be more precise on that. He located the wells nearby and the proposed discharge, and he used the particle tracking technique of the ModFlow model to do the particle tracking. And this is the USGS regional model that, again, he used. So in terms of the model, it comes from, again, the USGS study from Long Island, where they've done this throughout the island. It was a Herculean effort. And frankly, they did this on Cape Cod many years ago. So to produce a model like this that's now in the public domain is a huge step forward in terms of what can be done analytically. And those are the groundwater contours that are published from the USGS model. And so there's the grid pattern that he created from the wider grid pattern, okay? So in the model that Tom created, he's got 147,910 active cells. Which is versus 522. So that's the level of, let me call it, granular analysis that's been done. Now we got into, he built this conceptual model, and hydraulic conductivity is a very key parameter. It basically tells you how fast water moves in an area. And these are the details on his assumptions that hydrogeologists would want to know about. And then very importantly, he did a calibration of the model in which he used the USGS contours and what's called a water budget analysis, residual head. And this says that, geez, the residual head, he was off by 0.01 feet. So that's inconsequential. And so what basically says that the model that's been created is well calibrated and can be relied upon. Okay. We then start, next step he did is, okay, looked at Sylvester Manor, and let's look at the numbers there. I'm trying to get the whole puzzle by this thing.
Some of this information I think is redundant with the previous analysis. We're a little pressed for time.
Right, okay, let me speed things up. But basically what I wanted to show you here, in the transient analysis, he's looking at 16,000 gallons a day for the well 5, which was the key one, okay? The rest of these slides are the same ones that I presented earlier. Let me just maybe with the cross sections, et cetera. And just know that that analysis was done by Tom, and happy to now, I guess, is the right time to open this up for any questions or comments. So yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah.
So Joe, guess that was a great presentation if you understood 90% of what he was talking
So
about.
let's,
Calm it down for us.
Yes, Pio has the burden of presenting, highly technical analysis, in a public setting. So certainly, I can appreciate the position he's in, understanding that may be challenging for the average consumer to digest. But just to tie this all in conceptually with what we did and the applications to this project is that Addendum 1 looks at changes to the engineering report that developed after the first report went out. So we talked about possibly accommodating update to the building next door. There's a change in the numbers potentially there. We talked about looking at individual IA systems. PO presented not only the chart of variances that were identified, but the challenges with implementing individual systems on these sites. So that was one analysis that was done. Then that ties into those paths that you saw. We had to understand what happens to the water when it goes in the ground here, and what happens to the water when it goes in the ground wherever this project is proposed. And the individual system scenario, nothing changes with what you have now. The concentrations change because you put IA systems in at facilities that don't currently have them. But the map that PO showed of existing conditions where the red lines flow from this area of town to Menantic Creek, those lines won't largely change. That flow path is what's going to continue if we put individual systems in place. The other lines that head in the other direction, they're not going to change either, the police department and the justice hall. If you put individual systems at those sites, the wastewater is going to continue in the same directions that we've modeled. What are the implications of that exactly? Well, when we look at the travel time of how long it takes from when it goes in the ground to when it leaves the island, that tells us how long it's lingering and the propensity for it to get picked up by somebody else. If it spends more time in the ground, it's more likely that it's going to enter somebody else's drinking well. And the troubling information that we get from this model about where the water goes in its current location is that it goes through some of the most densely populated neighborhoods on the island. Between here and heading down to Menantic Creek, we have a lot of houses in a relatively small amount of space. We have a lot of well interference that happens. So that's a high traffic area. That's a high impact area. We then take that model and we look at what happens at the proposed Manwaring location, and we're looking for the same thing. What are the interferences? Does this get in the way of any of the neighbors' wells? Does this interfere with the Sylvester Manor operation? And who does it impact? And the conclusions are quite clear. You could probably tell from PO's excitement that this doesn't happen very often, but what we identify here is that at the Manwaring location, there's no interference. There's no down gradient users who are going to suck up what comes out of this plant. Up here, in its existing location, there's a lot. There's potentially dozens, if not hundreds of people who are underway. And we know that from, sort of widespread knowledge on the island. This is an area where we have high nitrogen in groundwater. And the people in this area, as we move further and further away from the school, are the ones who feel it the most. That's where we see high nitrogen data. So that's really the nutshell approach of what this modeling effort was for. It's all going to be wrapped up and put into one complete comprehensive report by the CEQA consultant. So this is, like we said, the first stage in talking about the analyses that were done. But the conclusions, the takeaway from these models, which, by the way, are incredibly helpful for developing water policy across the island in general. We didn't have this kind of precision and we didn't have this kind of modeling prior to this project. So, decision on this project notwithstanding, we can use this information for other policy choices we make in the future, understanding what the implications are of these kinds of decisions. So the big conclusions that we're taking away here are that we can have the most positive impact with no negative impact with the proposed 16 Manwaring location and the proposed 16 Manwaring equipment and treatment type.
Any questions from the town board?
No, that's a nice combination of the summation. Good.
I was going to ask, when you were talking about addendum 1, either one of you can answer this. You said it, talking about the required setbacks for the individual IA systems. You said it's not doable, but I was wondering if you could expand upon that a little bit, because it seemed to go quickly over that. So
it's not to say that it's not doable. It certainly would be something that we would have to work with regulators to get approved. We would be worsening the condition here in terms of variances and interference with those variances. So if we were to pursue the individual system approach, the list that PO provided would be all of the variances that we'd have to receive, in this case, from Suffolk County.
The town hall was going from 150 feet down to 81 feet.
Right.
And Justice Hall was going from 100 feet down to 75 feet reduction. So it was roughly half of what is currently required.
Right.
There are parcels of land here where it would make it very difficult unless we had tremendous reduction in that.
Right. And one important distinction on that, and Mike can attest to this, is those types of variances typically are incentivized to be approved on a residential scale because there is no other option. You know, when you are looking at replacing an old septic system with an IA system in a residential neighborhood, and the person needs a variance, what other choice do you have? You can't not have a septic system. So in those cases, they're looking for best fit, the best that you could do given the circumstances. And here, that's part of this analysis. What is the best thing that we can do? Yes, you may be seeking variances for individual systems, but there also are other options where we're talking about linking these buildings together, and perhaps you don't have to have such a violation of those setback distances because there are other solutions.
I think Pio said in his opening remarks, all the comments that we received over basically last year have been very helpful for the most part, because it's forced us to actually go into further detail and further research to address all of these concerns, which we have done. What's driving this with the current town board, and I would hope in future town boards, is that the water issue here in the center of town, the nitrogen levels, are something that we are committed, however we do it, to address. It's a number one priority for this town board, and I pray to God for the next town board. Our population, we owe it to the health of the people, most of the year-round people that live in the center of this island, to address this problem once and for all. However we decide to do it, we're going to do it in the best possible way with the best success rate. That's what's driving this.
You can finish because you started, you had your thoughts.
When talking about the impact of the proposed discharge on Gardner's Creek, you were using what the impact would be based upon the average, but the ground, the existing conditions, was that based on design standard or was that based on average standard as well? Because I just want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And I thought that you usually started, like, if you don't know, you're starting with design standards. So we should be comparing the 3% impact versus 1.8% impact.
I'm sorry.
Well, are you looking at existing conditions? Okay. We're using design standards for the contributions from every parcel. Okay. And we're using 50% of those. So, and for residential property, which represents a healthy percentage, our design, actual flows we're calculating is based upon 200 gallons a day. Okay. And we have used 200 gallons a day is a reasonable number to use for a residential property.
So that's the average.
That's the number to remember. We're not inflating. 400 gallons a day is the design, but that's obviously peak conditions.
Average for all parties.
That's what I was just.
Average for all parties. Yeah.
Well, and then Pio also had a slide where he was talking about what the output would be of the IA system, of the municipal treatment system, as opposed to what the output would be for one new residential construction with an IA system. And I was having trouble telling what the comparability of that slide was. Like,
Right, okay, so yeah, to boil this all down to as simple a package as you can make it, the after treatment, the output at the plant at 16-man Waring is equivalent to about one house on a conventional septic system in terms of its nitrogen output. So when Pio was doing that analysis about the broader Gardner's Creek watershed, we're talking about over 100 properties, probably about 100 structures, houses, and whatnot. Its total impact is equivalent to about one of those. So in terms of scale, you can get lost in the gallons per day, the pharmaceutical treatments, et cetera, but in terms of what's actually coming out, how many pounds of nutrients, it's the same as if we were to erect a new home anywhere within that watershed, the impact would be the same. A large home, which tends to be the new home.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a work session. We're not going to take comments on this till the end of the meeting. The plan was to digest everything that was done today, and next week it'll be open to the public.
And it looks like these two addendums have been added to the town website. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, we can shoot that out.
yeah, I'm just checking right now because there's a lot to digest
Yeah.
and lots of questions you'll be getting.
Lots of questions, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to discuss this at next week's work session?
Yes.
Okay,
And with dialogue from the
With-
questions
okay.
from the public also.
sounds good.
Okay. Leo, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Give you a second.
Appreciate your attention.
The town engineer stay for the comments.
Here's thing.
Yeah.
I'll take 5 or something, or?
I assume Pio's not.
Well, we have a lot. Your comment at the end about, before the questions was, how expensive, we were looking at a special permit for a large house. And one of the things I was wondering about is what is the impact of this large house? It would be on
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
neighboring- In this study that, yes, Tom Barry has done, how expensive it would be for us to do something that would be very localized to a special permit application?
The biggest expense is sort of setting up a model, which is what we did. So you'd be looking at separate runs of the model now for isolated situations, probably on a scale of, thousands of dollars, I would say, for individual, run. If you're thinking about applications for, I guess, an individual application, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. Certainly in situations that are highly sensitive.
Yeah, because I've always thought that would be helpful when we look at these things.
Yeah, I think, what's important to take away from these types of flow path models is that the groundwater knows no property line. So, the concept of what happens on my property is my right. That's not the case, and the lines that are demonstrated here, particularly in the existing conditions, those are just the lines for these municipal buildings. But in reality, there's a red line for every single septic system and well on the whole island. So if you looked at mapping those, you'd see a pretty intricate web of how we're all connected and who's receiving whose waste and the complexity of it.
Something to consider for.
And you'd be adding to that model if you did it, one by one, it would be.
Exactly. Okay. Next on the agenda is the wetlands application of 56A Cartwright Road. I believe we were waiting for a CAC report on this. Ed, what you need?
So, Keller?
Yes.
I have it handy if.
Yeah.
What they had said was they recommend the plans as shown with the 100 square foot unregulated area. 5 to 0 in favor of.
That's also what I had.
No stipulations.
No, it was pretty straightforward. Most of the things they are already accommodated for in the application. And the property is kind of so restricted that they didn't really have much choice but to become more.
Okay.
No.
Okay, next on the agenda would be Cornell Cooperative Extension Fund request. This hearing was closed. It's really just for us to decide what we want to do with this. I think the biggest concern is this is the most money we've ever used, WQI money, $200,000 committed. And, I think everyone supports the project. It's just the concern of, it's an awful lot of money to try something. I'd be in favor of scaling it back a little, but I'd rather hear from everybody else.
WQI just touched upon it briefly at the meeting on Thursday, and one of the recommendations was to build into the resolution that a periodic report from Cornell Cooperative Extension, just report back. I think they said monthly, but I think quarterly maybe might be a better, just because it's science and you gotta take time for let things populate,
Yeah.
see how.
I was kind of thinking quarterly too, just because it takes time to do all of these things. You're not going to get a lot of turnover every month.
Yeah. So that would be like the one thing to build on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the full ask. I think I would support doing the whole project because I see it as part of like a larger water quality remediation plan for the island. You know, it's like, we have our groundwaters, we have our surface waters. We're doing things to work on our groundwater with the installation of IA systems. That also impacts our surface waters. But we don't have too many projects in the works to directly work in our basin estuaries. And I think this is a good stepping stone for that, to kind of work on that side of things.
You know, I have mixed emotions on it, obviously. It's a huge ask, a lot of money, $200,000. I sit in a unique position because obviously I hold the position for the Peconic Estuary Partnership, which I'm the chairman of the East End part of that. And they're dumping $600,000 into the same effort over the next 2 years here on Shelter Island, which I think is going to go a long way as well. I was a little concerned about the success rate and taking this kind of money, not knowing necessarily what the dividends we're going to pay in the future. I think I'm going to probably recuse myself from the vote because of my position on the PEP. But I think I would ask that this data collection is, you know, I won't be here for the next vote for this next year. But there'll be another ask. And hopefully, we were told not to the extent of $200,000, but a lesser amount. But I would hope that the people that return to the town board and the new members that come on here, when they make that decision, it has to be based on success rates. And success rates are largely determined by doing the necessary pre-work prior to dumping money into the water. You know, that's for both seagrass or eelgrass restoration or for shellfish restoration. I think the project has a lot of merits. I like the fact that she's local and that she's making an investment in our waters. I love the fact that, you know, that we've had 4 tough years for shellfishing here, particularly as it pertains to certain types of shellfish. Our eelgrass seems to be doing very, very well in Cockles Harbor, but not well in other bays like West Neck and other places. But it'll be a little, you know, I think when you enter into something like this, you got to expect that there's going to be some successes and there's probably going to be some failures. But you'll learn from that. It's just a question of whether I thought it was worth, you know, that kind of investment in the first year of this, you know, to go that heavily. But that's basically how I feel. I love the effort. I love the enthusiasm for, you know, addressing these concerns with both eelgrass and shellfish. But I'm just convinced further that the money is being well spent. That's all.
Just so everyone knows, we have almost $3,000 in the WQI funds, less whatever's committed already.
3 million. I was going to say 3,000. Well, then we don't even have a budget.
Less whatever's
Of
committed.
which, about 300,000 is committed, so 2.8 million.
Right. Right. I know where BJ stands on this, but we lost her on the Zoom, so I don't think we're gonna vote on it, but do a special meeting next week.
Yeah, I
Are we going to draft the resolution to?
yeah, I would do it.
Draft it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
Yeah.
3-1 and 1 abstain.
I think it's going to be 3-1-1. Okay, yeah. So I think the three ladies are in favor of it? No.
Yes.
Well, we can't approve it today because.
No.
Can't approve it. We can't take a vote.
The resolution is
Okay.
And the resolution.
Do you have?
No, because we need to put in the periodicity,
That's,
That could be an easy hit.
if you can do it on the fly.
Let's do a
But
special
yeah,
meeting.
BJ's not.
Okay, we could do
She's
this.
not here to vote, so
Yeah.
we could vote.
She could have voted if she was on Zoom, because she has a legal absence.
She's traveling and
Yeah.
has lost her Zoom connection.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's it on that. Now we're gonna close the work session and open a special meeting for 3 items. The first is the Chapter 129 Wetlands Local Law Update. Stephen, you want to give just a synopsis of why we're doing this?
Well, the major reason is that we want to transfer the permitting authority from the town board to the planning board. That was the major reason why.
Want to explain why?
Well, administrative efficiencies. The town board,
Read the notice? Is that, did I miss something?
correct, you're right. Good
I'm
catch.
right?
Is this the first time we're doing this? Did we-
Yes, yes, this is the first time.
We adjourned it now.
Yeah, no, it's the first time.
Well, we had the work session where Ian came in and presented it, so now this is the.
This is the public hearing.
So you're
Linda,
set.
take it away.
The town board hereby directs that a special meeting be held for a proposed local law entitled, a local law amending chapter 129 entitled Wetlands, to transfer approval authority from the town board to the planning board to enhance the application process. Remedy clearing inconsistency and clarify the new construction wetlands permit 100 square foot section. So I do have 3 letters
Okay,
that apply to the wetlands.
thanks. From,
And they can
tell us who
be,
they're from.
oh, I'm sorry. Shelter Island Association, Shelter Island Heights Property Owners, and Pam Demrust.
Thank you, Linda.
Sure.
That's for you. Go to the summary of the.
Yeah, all right, so the legislative intent is the town board finds that the planning board, due to its collective knowledge of the environment, construction practices, and property design, the proper board to review and decide upon wetland permit applications. Planning board has heretofore reviewed every wetlands application and provide well-reasoned recommendations to the town board to act. Thus, they are well equipped to accept this delegation, which will ultimately streamline the process to save both town administrative resources and the applicant's time. Further, the town board has determined that the application process could be enhanced, clearing inconsistency between the clearing code provision and the wetlands table can be cured, and clarification of the new construction wetlands 100 square foot exemption be made. So again, that's, again, the major impetus, transfer authority from the town board to the planning board. The intent clearly says why. Again, if the town board is heavily relying on the planning board and the CAC for their determinations, it seems silly to have another layer of bureaucratic review when those two boards are making the necessary review on behalf of the town board. It just adds more delay and time into the process, and we have to keep in mind, the applicants, and, what they have to go through and the timing with them being able to get necessary approvals and do construction. So Ian, I don't know if you wanted to come up.
Well, let's have the Heights and the Shelter Island Association. I don't know if Pam's on. And again, just so everyone understands the process, the town board looks to the planning board and the CAC as our experts on this, and they make the decisions, and we usually rubber stamp what their decision is. So it seems kind of silly to have, an extra step in there. We're already doing all the work. LB, are you, LB?
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Beard Raymond, and I'm the manager for the Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation. And I'm here today representing the views of the Property and Roads Committee. I strongly object to any changes to Chapter 129 that will relax protections to our environmentally sensitive wetlands. The Heights also objects to the transfer of approval authority to the Planning Board. These changes will have a negative impact on our community and the environment by placing our valuable wetlands at risk, the wetlands that we are all entrusted to protect. The town board is confronted by a wide variety of environmental issues related to groundwater, surface water, aging septic systems, runoff, flooding, erosion, contaminants, and overdevelopment. The wetlands are under siege due to large construction projects along the shoreline and human abuse. An unprecedented number of applications have been submitted to the town since the beginning of this year for wetlands and/or special permits over 6,000 square feet. 8 are currently listed on the town board, and surprisingly, 3 more are on the planning board agenda for tonight's meeting that are not yet posted on the town board's application page. The Heights believes that the town should be more restrictive with its protections to the wetlands, and loopholes should be closed. Our comments fall into 3 categories: relaxing restrictions, governments, and administration. The Heights is deeply concerned by the recommendation to eliminate the demolition permit requirement in town wetlands, since heavy equipment and debris, if not properly managed, may cause more damage or as much damage to the wetlands as new construction. The Heights objects to the recommendation of the
Lori,
elimination.
quick question. How would you prefer, a response to each one of these? Or would you rather just go through your letter?
I'd rather go through my letter, and
Okay.
I'm happy to.
Sure, that's fine.
The Heights objects to the recommendation to elimination of the EAF requirement, which according to the New York State DEC is used by an approving agency to assist in determining the environmental significance or non-significant actions of the proposed actions. If the 100-square-foot exemption is to remain, it should be strengthened to make it one-time exemption accommodation for new construction up to 100 square feet, effectively from when the code was adopted for this exemption. Any cumulative exemption should be eliminated to reduce repeated disturbance of wetlands. In governments and decision-making, the Heights does not support the transfer of the approval authority to the planning board. The town board has direct responsibility for the island's overall plan and strategy, and its makeup is of an elected officials who are held accountable by the voters. The planning board has an important but narrower focus, whose members are appointed by the town board. 2, the Heights believe it is inappropriate for the planning board to recommend amendments to the town code, as well as to approve wetlands permits, as it exposes planning board members to real or perceived conflicts of interest. Some members of the planning board are involved in projects that are sponsored by the town. Other members frequently seek relief from the town code for their own clients and private interests. Due to time constraints, the public is only allowed to speak for 3 minutes. I'm going to refer you to the rest of my, to the letter I wrote for the administration comments. Simply put, the Heights does not support loosening of the wetlands restrictions. To the contrary, the Heights recommends defending the existing restrictions and adding even more rigid protections, such as not allowing any new development or clearing within the 100 feet wetlands. That said, the Heights does support selective administration edits to the wetland codes that addresses inconsistencies and/or clarifies requirements. In closing, the shelter island is changing. And in order to protect our environment and our natural resources, we need more restrictions, not less. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well,
Let's get everybody if we're gonna.
yeah.
I just have a question. I wasn't under the impression that this eliminated the need for a demolition permit. I thought it just, like, let's say, for instance, you had like an old gazebo in your front yard that was within the setback. You would still have to go to the building department to get a demo permit, but you wouldn't have to go through the entire wetlands process just to remove that derelict structure.
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I was confused.
I didn't talk about building permits. I'm only talking about wetlands.
No, I know, but
No,
there
but there is
a
oversight.
reference to the demolition permit. I got confused with the demolition permit comment, because I thought that we weren't removing any permitting requirements, like you still need a demo permit,
Building
yeah.
department's completely separate.
Yeah, that's why I just confused myself is what it was. It wasn't, it was me.
No, but to your point, like, we're not saying it's a wild, wild west with demoing and there's no
Right.
oversight. Building department on most structures has oversight and you have to get a demo permit to take it down. So this is just eliminating the added burden on homeowners to have to come to an administrative body to take something out of the jurisdiction, which seems silly, so long as there's steps being taken to protect the wetlands that I'm sure Reed will employ.
Right, I was just confused, but I'm good now, thank you.
Next on the list, I have Howard Johannes.
I thought, okay.
Yes, I basically agree with what Laura says on most of the items. One thing I have questioned is on the site plan, on the website, it has the code. But what happened to Article 1 and Article 3? Is that the entire code now that is on the website?
The article, yeah, this just reflects what's being changed. It's not the entire.
But the instructions say it will be scratched out and shown what's being changed. And that's not on the website.
I'm not following,
Article 1 is completely eliminated.
because it's not being changed.
Oh, it's not being changed at all.
Correct.
So there's a lot in that section.
Yeah, because articles that are being changed are referenced in this local law.
Okay, so ones that are being, okay, I didn't understand it because you added a section 1 and a section 2, which were never part of that code.
No. That's just section 1 and section 2 of the resolution, the amendment. So section 1 is,
Part of the.
correct, section 1 is the legislative intent
So,
while you're doing it, and then section 2 is just explaining what we're doing. We're changing Article 2 permits, and that's why that's listed. So everything else is remaining the same.
so that remains the same. My other question was, what happened to Article 3?
You mean what happened to it?
It's up. You've changed things in there, like the servability and stuff like that, but what happened to the definitions?
No,
That's all,
remaining the same.
Remains the same, just like Article 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because what you're referring to is sections.
Right.
Not articles. So the section, this is just procedural stuff that goes in. It's part of the vehicle on making an amendment. It has nothing to do with the substance of the
It's not
law.
going to be in the code.
Correct.
Okay, so the code stays in Article 3 as it is,
Yes,
and Article 1.
until, exactly. And the things that are changed in the articles I've referenced are either with a strike through or an underline. So underline's being added, strike through is being removed.
And I personally object to the elimination of the demolition permit. I think that's a necessity in this property, all the wetlands. We don't know how it's going to be. I know that the building department will assure that, but I think some other things should be done with that. That permit must be required. I don't know why we're changing this at this time, when we're in the process of probably changing half the board. Why?
I think what we're trying to do, Howard, is fix the process. And the purpose of this hearing is, to see what the public, how they feel. I mean, you guys feel one way. I know Ian's gonna feel another way. So that was for us to hear all this before we, the board didn't change anything. These are all from recommendations. Right.
Okay. Because I think, like in Article 1, it really emphasizes the importance of this code and the regulations of the town board, assuring that this is taken care of by.
Our intent wasn't to change any regulations. It was to make the process more efficient.
But in changing the process, you're changing the authority of the board to vote on it. You're giving it basically.
But again, the board bases their authority, their approval on the recommendations of the planning board of the CAC. So it's like,
But at least you have 5 people on the board that agree with those recommendations or don't agree. Right now, if we give recommendations, if you don't agree, you don't define what you didn't agree to.
well, yeah, they're in the stipulations, well, it wasn't.
Not all of them, all the time.
Well, the ones that
You might
are,
eliminate them for some reason.
yeah, the ones that are agreed to are memorialized in the resolution. The ones that
Exactly.
are not.
Can we, the ones we don't agree with,
They're left out.
would be now the planning board would do that?
Yeah, the planning board would be the approving authority.
I mean, part of the regulation should be that elected officials are responsible to the town, not an appointed board.
The planning board planning board's not like the CAC or no, not that it's paid, they're their own authority. They have their own rules and regulations that they go by. It's not, well, we think this. And they have their own attorney at every meeting. They have to follow the letter of the law. So it's really not the same as a committee.
Right. I understand.
And just so you know, like, the New York State has deemed the planning board to have a little more authority than typical boards. Like, they grant them specific authority in town law for subdivision, specific authority for site plans, specific authority for special use, if it's delegated by the town board. But the state legislature made a determination that they have the ability to take over certain functions from the town board. And they also, in town law, references the fact that the planning board may recommend to the town board regulations relating to any subject matter over which the planning board has jurisdiction under this article, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm saying is, they would be the appropriate body, and they have the infrastructure, they have their own attorney, they have their own engineer. And to respond to the people that say, hey, wait a minute, well, they're electeds, and they can be voted out if we don't like what they're doing. But the same thing can be said about appointees. Appointees are appointed by the town board. So if you don't like the town board, you don't like what the appointees are doing, you get rid of the town board, put people in that'll put members on those boards and appoint members on those boards that you feel would do a better job. So they ultimately are still accountable to the voters, the appointment.
I just think it's wrong to switch that. And the planning board, I'm not arguing that they aren't capable of doing it, because they're very capable people. Licensed architect, like I was a licensed professional engineer, so we know what's going on. Both committees, and I understand their responsibilities more. They have legal people involved with this.
But I just want to say something as one town board member. I'm not totally convinced that I want to go on all this. I think Lori made some key points that I wanted to address. I love the process that we're getting feedback from the public. A person like you that's in charge of you're a co-chairman of a major committee of the CAC. So I like the fact that we're going to get this kind of feedback. I mean, the only real vested interest I had here was trying to encourage existing homeowners that had things within the restricted areas to get them out of the wetlands in the most efficient, cost-effective way possible without disturbing, with the least damage to the environment. So I don't care who makes that decision, but I wanted to be able to encourage people that have things that are within that 100-foot vegetated area to get that stuff out of there, whether it's a pit or a gazebo or whatever it might be. And I'm not interested in the town, collecting monies to make that happen. I just want to see it out. But in doing so, I want all the safeguards in there that protect the environment. I want to encourage people to start to pay greater respect to both the 75 and the 100-foot setbacks. I think you, as the chairman, and that committee have echoed that same sentiment over and over again. And I respect that. And I think yes. So I'm not totally convinced who makes that decision, but I'm glad we're getting the feedback and we're discussing it.
Yeah, because as you know, there's properties that after having even been permitted, that they put in swimming pools, like you go down on Harwich Drive, there's a property there that the permits are not in place and came in front of us. It hasn't gone to the board because it was dropped. But I understand the reasons is because it was a cash payment for the property.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to go through inspections and all of that. It's the people who bought it said, well, I'll take care of it. We haven't, the one that we have on Covey Drive too. So I just think that I just feel that elected officials, that's the people who should be in charge of the same.
It's interesting. We get the conversations. We need a planning board. We need a town manager.
Yes.
We need this, we need that. We're giving the work to who we deem are professionals in this area. And, now you want us to do it as opposed to a town manager or a town planner.
Honestly, in addition to, I'm not saying get rid of the planning board or any town manager or anything like that. I think the responsibility for the citizens of the island should be through the elected officials, not through appointed officials.
Most towns have planning.
Yeah, most town boards do not hear these kinds of cases. They either have conservation boards, which are independent bodies, or have trustees that handle wetlands applications. So this is actually novel, and the town board has made a determination that they want to focus on other things, on legislating, and as opposed to doing this administrative action, which a board is much better served to do, and better capable to do. So
Thank you, Howard.
He was just saying too, because it's,
Thank you.
appropriate.
Okay, Albert, you're next.
Good afternoon, folks. I see a few comments. Ian McDonald is an architect with clients on Shelter Island that have come before the town board seeking relief from the wetlands code. Isn't this a conflict? A serious conflict?
Want us to answer, or you want to wait till you're done?
I'll just go through these. My comments on some of the specific changes. Eliminating the need for an environmental assessment. Why would we want to do that? Is there anything more important than protecting our wetlands? No. If anything, we would require an environmental assessment. It should be our wetlands. You're allowing demo to take place. I know we went through that, but it seems like that's building in a loophole that could be taken advantage of. We have so many loopholes in our town code that we're dealing with now. You guys are dealing with them now. We know them, what they are, and this is kind of creating, I think, the potential for another one. You're eliminating the requirement that the applicant provide a $500,000 liability insurance policy. That protects the town. Why are you eliminating that? That's protection.
That was on advice of the insurance company.
You're allowing the application to proceed prior to Suffolk County Department of Health issuing approvals. What if the health department doesn't approve the project and construction is already underway? What is that?
I'm not sure what you mean on that.
Well, I don't think all of these wetlands applications require Suffolk County Department of Health. So for example, right now, if you have an old gazebo in your front yard and you want to take it down, you need a full wetlands application to just demo that section. There's no health department involvement in that.
DEC?
What's that?
You mean the DEC?
Oh, Suffolk County Health Department, isn't that in your revisions?
No.
That you're allowing projects to proceed?
No, it's the reverse. It's saying the planning board will only accept and process wetlands permit applications if they are accompanied by any requisite authorization from the New York State DEC and/or a copy of the Suffolk County Department of Health permit or application for permit.
But if somebody is applying for a wetlands permit, wouldn't they need possibly Suffolk County Department of Health approval?
You said that.
Yes.
That's what I just said.
It's requiring that health department
It's
approval
required.
be
Okay.
in
All right.
place prior to the wetlands application.
Okay. I guess in your summary statement, you're trying to, as you say, upgrade and enhance the application process. But what I feel you're really doing is streamlining and fast tracking the process for the benefit of the applicants and to the detriment of our environment. The structure of the town government is the town board makes the final decisions on all things. They make the final decisions. Why are you transferring this process and responsibility to the planning board? You say they have the expertise. I don't wish to disparage the members of the planning board. That is not my intent. But please tell me, where is the environmental professional? Where is the planning professional on the planning board?
We got the CAC that has an environmental.
On the planning, I'm talking about transferring.
But the planning board is going to be relying on CAC recommendations.
Why doesn't the town board rely on?
Because that's what they're doing right now, and they're relying on all these, so we're trying to streamline the process.
For the benefit of the applicant,
And the
right?
town board, so the town board could do what they're charged to do, not review wetlands.
I think this is a mistake. I think it's the town board is not willing to put in place a strong foundation to ensure.
Well, but based on what you just said, really the planning board's not qualified to do anything without the professionals on their staff.
I'm sorry?
Based on the way I understand what you just said, was that our planning board is not qualified to do anything because they don't have professionals on their staff.
With wetlands, with this particular
With anything,
aspect.
with anything.
Well, I'm not saying everything.
But this
We're
board
talking
doesn't,
about
this
wetlands
this board
applications.
doesn't either. This board relies on the planning board's expertise and the CAC's expertise to fill that gap. So we're just getting rid of a
I'm
step.
talking about this wetlands revision. That's what I'm referring to.
No, that's what I'm saying. There's no environmental expert on this board.
Right. But the town board makes the decisions with these applications.
And Albert, you know from sitting here that we've always based it on the recommendations of the planning board and the CAC.
Leave it there, Jerry. That's what I'm saying. Leave it there. The town board is the last arbiter of all decisions. Leave it there.
Well, that's not true. You have zoning board, that's the last arbiter on area variances, use variances, special
I can see that.
permits.
I don't wanna
And then you have planning board, which is site plan.
I don't want to argue.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of people on Shelter Island that are passionate about the wetlands.
As they should be.
And I know that the South Hole Town Council candidate that's passionate about agriculture.
Yes.
Here, passionate about
And
wetlands.
wetlands, absolutely.
Thank you.
Kim Nolan, sent us a letter from the Shelter Island Association, Kim?
We can't hear you, you're muted.
Thank every speaker who's gone before me, and I reiterate and affirm that the Shelter Island Association agrees with everything they said too, especially Albert at the last there, saying that this law is streamlining to the detriment of our environment. I've been president of the Shelter Island Association for 2 years, and I have never seen the kind of unanimity we have on this one. Every single trustee opposes this law and wants to know why, why. Okay, well, we've heard already from the town board a few reasons why, but I'm just going to really hit the high points of our letter. We don't think the town needs to make it easier for applicants. An amazing part of Shelter Island is its shoreline, and a huge part. This is an island, and I think sometimes I shouldn't even have to say so, but a huge part of what goes on, if you watch town meetings, is what's happening with the shoreline. So just in terms of the specifics of the legislation, I think it's pretty much all been said, which is to leave it the way that it is. Sorry. So I'm going to conclude my remarks. Sorry if I got too passionate, but I guess I agree with Albert that there's a good reason to be passionate about this.
Thank you. Bob Collins next.
Thank you. I'm old enough to remember when Jim Colligan sat in the chair he's sitting in right now, where he said that the protection of the wetlands is one of the most important things this town board does. And I don't know why, if that's true, and I think a lot of people in this town agree with that, I don't see why we reduce the transparency of the process by shifting this over to the responsibility of the planning board, who's competent to do this. But I think this is entirely unnecessary. I think, as the supervisor said, the town board does heavily rely upon the planning board's advice on these issues. If you want to reduce your workload or reduce your role in the process, you can simply put a higher level of credibility in the recommendations that the planning board makes. But I think you should retain the responsibility, because if you reduce the transparency, you're going to have strange things happening. You might remember 3 or 4 years ago, the Tuthill Drive Association went through a process where we had a problem with the lack of transparency. A property construction site or construction proposal was denied by the ZBA. The variances were denied because of the proximity to the wetlands. And they determined it was basically unbuildable because of the tidal wetlands line was so close to where they wanted to build. And the town board, the property owner filed an Article 78 proceeding with the court, and the town itself, two attorneys ago, completely defended the ZBA because that process was a proper process. I wasn't even here. This was like 10 years ago. But there was a change in supervisor and there was a change in town attorney. And all of a sudden, there was a secret settlement that the town made to allow those variances to take place. And then there was a violation of the open meetings law with the ZBA where they signed a resolution saying that they allowed this process. And of course, you had a wetlands hearing, which was after all of those variances. And of course, you made the decision to do it. Now, one of the specific problems that I want to point out is in the section 129-4 permit procedure, there's a change in section 1, which would add, and I'm moving to a little separate subject here, where you would consider including a delineated wetlands boundary flagged by a credentialed environmentalist within 5 years of submission of the application. Well, as you recall, the process that I had gone through, there were actually over a period of 15 or 20 years, like 5 different wetlands delineations. And I had more of an expert neighbor of mine, Mark Ween, was able to point out that that line kept moving, the title's water wetlands line kept moving toward seaward, kept moving toward the water, which didn't make any sense. But the town board accepted the one that was within the past 5 years, the most recent one, which was closer to the water, which allowed 75 feet. So if you're going to have to determine that, you're going to say it's got to be, you can't build within 75 feet. Well, the question is 75 feet from what? So if you make this a less transparent process, my concern, and I think a concern of a lot of other people, is that shenanigans could be
How is it
going
not
on.
transparent? I'm confused.
Well, because when this comes to the town board, people don't attend the planning board meetings like they do the town board meetings.
But that's transparency. They're available to.
I think that if you were going to take the position that, and I think we all agree that wetlands is very, very important, particularly along the seashore and the protection of the environment, the protection of the shell fishermen, all that stuff, then you have to bring it up to the higher level. I think that's what people are trying to say to you. There's one other thing I wanted to say about the process, and this, but I think the fact of the matter is you can still leave the decision with you, but give the planning board, make sure the planning board does a higher level of due diligence than doing perhaps in the past. And what you should do if you want to reduce your burden is say, look, we're going to review the process. As long as the process was fair at the planning board, we're going to accept it. So someone has to come to you, not just to re-argue what they argued to the planning board. They should be able to prove to you that there was something wrong with their process, a conflict of interest, there should have been a board of ethics review or whatever it was. That's what your standard of judgment should be. The process was fair, we're going to go along with their decision. And that reduces your burden, but keeps you in the responsibility. Because if someone comes up to you and says, hey, that process sucked because something, as Al Dixon had pointed out and others have pointed out, then you can say, okay, we're going to review the process. And if you have to, review it de novo from the beginning. You know, if you feel that's what justice requires to protect the wetlands.
Thank you. Thanks. Tim Bostrom?
Yeah, hi. Quick question, and this is for the town board, not the town attorney. Who's going to be lead agency under this new proposal that you're turning over wetlands review to the planning board?
Planning board. The planning board would be lead agency on the applications that they're reviewing with their land use attorney and their engineer.
Yes, well, you do have an agreement with the DEC right now that says that the town board is the lead agency. So are you going to change that?
We can designate them to be our.
No.
This is,
He's misunderstanding the secret process.
My question actually is for the town board.
Actually, but the town attorney is more adept at answering it.
Just like the zoning board is the lead agency for variances,
Right.
just like the planning board is lead agency for subdivisions. The planning board here would be lead agency. I don't know what he's referring to about an agreement that the town board be lead agency for every discretionary approval.
Well, it's in the legislation.
I think it's the town, it says the town is lead agency.
That's correct, Jerry, thank you.
Yeah, so the planning. board
Yeah,
is
and
an
part of
agent
the town, yes, good.
Yeah, anyway, again, just to repeat, my question is for the town board, not for the town attorney. The last time that the town attorney told me I didn't understand SECRA, he went into the timeout room because of his advice to the town board. The town board got sued because of his advice.
Let's not go there.
Oh, why not?
No, I'm saying to our people. I'm not saying to you. Keep on going. You got the mic.
All right, so in addition to who's going to be the lead agency, which you have an agreement right now, it's the town. The law is very clear that the town, having designated itself as town agency, cannot delegate this responsibility to subdivisions of the town. That's the law.
Okay, that's your opinion, thank you.
No, I'm sorry, that is the law. And then the final thing I want to point out is that despite the town having designated itself as the lead agency, Jerry starts out this discussion with his pronouncement that the town board rubber stamps these recommendations from sub-agencies of the town. That's also a violation of SECRA.
The town board looks to the expertise of the CAC and the planning board for their determinations.
Jerry, your word was we rubber stamp it.
Well, basically, that's what we do because we look for their recommendations. They know a lot more about the procedure than about the subject than we do, and that's why we have them do it.
Well, then why not designate them as the lead agency, Jerry? Why would you pronounce that you rubber stamp something that you delegated to a sub-agency of the town? That's a violation of SECRA.
Kim, I agree with you. I don't like the term rubber stamp. I'm not up here as a town board member to rubber stamp anything. I think we need a little clarification. We normally accept the recommendations from the committees. We normally do. But we are a series of checks and balances up here. I agree with that.
Yeah, but you're trying to eliminate that.
Well, I'm listening to the arguments. I'm trying to make up my mind in an intelligent way based upon the arguments. I'm listening carefully and to your points as well as the other speakers.
All right, here's the bottom line. SECRA says that the town board as lead agency has to take a hard look at these proposals. You're talking about eliminating the EAF. You're talking about rubber stamping decisions that are made by subdivisions of the town board. Now, you've been sued twice over SECRA. This is a mistake that you guys are making. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Ian?
There are a lot of questions. Ian McDonald, Chairman of the Planning Board. I heard a bunch of questions. How do you want me to answer them? Have a list that you want me to go through?
Well,
Let's start with the Shelter Island Association.
well, also, the EAF suggested that the EAF should still be made part of the application process. We've discussed this, that since what you would be dealing with are type 2 actions, an EAF is not required pursuant to SECRA.
So we were advised by our land use attorney, planning board's attorney, that the type 2 action, a wetlands for a residential property is type 2 action that requires a simplified secret. It does not require the submission of an EAF. It is our experience that most applicants who submit EAFs, the EAFs come out misfilled. They're not properly, they don't start with the DEC's official EAF mapper. They have a lot of inconsistencies, and their value is limited. We find that our knowledge of the property and of the project is much more important and useful. On top of that, we are not omitting this secret process. We still go through that. We're just not asking for this extra level of paperwork to be submitted, which is mostly incorrect anyway, procedure, or quite often.
And just for the board's edification, a type 2 action doesn't require secret review. That's the problem. Again, EAF is if there is secret review required, i.e. if it's a type 1 action or an unlisted action, then the EAF is required. Type 2, no secret. That's why when people talk about lead agency this, lead agency that, for the most part, lead agency is only involved, like I know they mix up the terms, but lead agency is only when there is an EAF due to an unlisted action or a type 1 and there are other agencies involved. There are involved agencies, then you have to have one to be the quote unquote lead agency. So I just wanted to clarify that on the record.
And the first one was the demolition permit.
So,
reasoning behind that.
Let me go to the other one too, because I think of most people on the planning board, the CAC, experience applying with the DEC, the health department. I've gone to the DEC both for wetlands variance permits, letters of non-jurisdiction. I've gone to for bulkheads and docks. I filed with the building department on Shelter Island, the zoning board of appeals. I'm probably one of them in a position where I have the most experience of a lot of people. It's my experience, going now to your question, when someone has to spend the amount of money for a consultant or to put together an application, update surveys, to updo everything, have the wetlands delineated, to remove something small, they're going to say, well, I'm going through all this effort and expense. I'm going to tack on a few other wishes as part of the application to maybe limiting something in the vegetative buffer, but I'm going to ask for more in the adjacent regulated area because I'm already making the application. We feel that there's protections if we eliminate the wetlands permit, that typically one has to go to the building department for a permit to do a demolition, and the requirement for wire back, silt fencing, or other protections can be put there. If they have to go through, again, the whole process, the onerous administrative review, just because they want to remove something more, they're going to make the project bigger.
Or they're going to do it illegally.
Or
without any silt fence and any,
that could be too. And, so.
Wait, Reed, did you want to just chime in on demolition permits from the building department's perspective?
Sure. Yeah, my only concern, I think it's important to keep a separation as far as policy goes between the building. We're only really tasked with enforcement and inspection. The only thing I would say is that if you are going to eliminate wetlands permits for demolition, then it's important to make sure that things don't slip through the cracks. And there are certain things that don't require a building permit. For example, pulling out changing a sanitary system that is overseen by Suffolk County Department of Health, but Suffolk County Department of Health isn't concerned with wetlands violations. So I would just say that if you're going to do that, then make sure that there's some apparatus for oversight so that they do put in silt fence, so that they don't do all the things you don't want them to do in the wetlands, like tear stuff up with machinery.
I think if we made, right now you would say most structures require a demo permit, and there's certain ones that don't.
Certain ones would not.
Okay, if we made those certain ones.
Yeah, I think that would.
Building demo permit applicable, then we'd solve the problem.
Yeah, if you decide to go ahead and, not require a wetlands permit for demolition, then I would say make sure that whatever you foresee as being activities that could disrupt the wetlands, that they, A, either require a building permit, or B, have very clear requirements, silt fence, not using machinery in the, seaward of where they want to, just because otherwise we'll get a lot of complaints and have nothing, no teeth to deal with it.
Thank you.
And also, I know liability insurance came up.
Yeah, so we polled our attorney and our engineer, and they didn't see the liability requirements in other towns. We reached out through Amber and Meg, and Amber also to the town's insurance underwriter, and they said the requirement wasn't coming from them. They do know that some towns ask for it, but it's not a requirement of them. The question at hand typically, and I think is who really needs to carry the insurance? And that's the contractor, the person doing the work. And that's already done through their licensing with the town, that they have a record of general liability and workman's comp. And so that's on record with the town due to the contractor. I don't know about why the homeowner has to put this other level when it's of insurance on it, where, again, other towns don't do so, and our town underwriter doesn't require it.
Thanks, Reed.
And if I could just point out a couple things, Mr. Cohn raised the delineation of the wetlands boundary. That was never in the code. We're adding that to make sure that that's in the survey. So, or on the survey rather, because obviously that's very important in determining the buffer to make sure it's flagged, and it's flagged not just by anybody, but by a credentialed environmentalist. And then also what we're adding to, protect the wetlands is a vegetation plan from a licensed design professional that includes existing and proposed vegetation, density of buffer, screening, landscaping to be utilized, and any other information required by the planning board or CAC. So we're making it more robust, the vegetation plan, and one that could be enforceable.
And to that one
point, Ian also added that we should have, at the end of the process, an environmental consultant paid for by the applicant to make sure that the plantings adhere to that plan that's more robust.
But it's not the applicant's environmental consultants, it's the town's environmental consultant compensated by the applicant.
Wayne, I think the last point for you is the fact that there's a real or perceived conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I think, I just want to say, this is a very small community, and it's going to be very hard to get anybody on any committee that doesn't have some kind of conflict with something eventually. We have had conflicts before, and you've recused yourself. You've stepped down. The town, some of us have talked about possibly putting alternates on the some of the committees, either for that purpose or for if they can't make it because of absences. So I don't know if you want to speak.
I don't know if we should, have Ian respond to this, because it's comments leveled at him. I think I'd rather just say we're in the process of updating the ethics code, and that will allow us as a town board to go to the ethics committee to say, we are concerned that this is a violation. Tell us how we should guide any committee member, board member to act in certain situations. I don't want to put it on this.
Actually, I would like to.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Through my practice, I get maybe one involved in one wetlands application a year. Maybe it's one every other year. I used to handle on my own. Now I outsource them to an expediter. So there's a level of being removed. If something that I've worked on, a project comes in front of the wetlands, I just recuse myself. I walk out of the room. It's not for me to handle. I'm not going to be able to, I think maybe there were 15, 16, 17 wetlands applications last year, and I was involved with one that was very minor. And so I don't see that it's an issue from my part. I have no problem going under ethics review if that comes to what's been decided. But I feel very confident in my ability to be involved with this process.
Yeah,
Any questions for Ian?
the ethics code is going to have the substantial disclosure and recusal provision. So it would, and the ethics board is mindful of being a very small town and a lot of conflicts that we still need the people to be able to participate in government. So I think that will solve any issue with Ian.
Okay, Bob, before you come up, Pam Demarest. Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much.
See.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Pam.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, this is a very important topic to me. I'm sure you're well aware of that. I followed all of the most current wetlands applications to the town in, I guess, the last 2 years. One of the things I'm going to bring up right now that Mr. McDonald mentioned is that the town's been aware of short environmental assessment forms that have been incorrectly filed and hasn't done anything about it. So this is a concern to me. If you see that there's something in error on that form, which is supposed to be a tool to help you evaluate the property, that's why the state has developed these forms, then it's up to the lead agency then to make the announcement to the other involved agencies on wetlands permits that such a discrepancy exists, and it should be corrected. So it disturbs me that not only has the planning board recently ignored my request to have that taken care of on other applications, but the planning board has also recognized that in the past and has done nothing to cure that problem. The current lead agency agreement with the DEC does in fact say that they are required to get a copy of a properly completed EAF. So I really don't see the advantage of eliminating the applicant from submitting this form. This form takes all of about 3 minutes to produce from the DEC website. That's it. If you do the full form, it takes about 5 minutes to produce. I don't think it's a lot to ask and an excessive burden on the applicants to produce this piece of paper that tells you what the DEC already has designated the project site to be, you know, significantly.
Can I chime in? And Pam, if I may, just the EAF, if it's done correctly, is going to take a lot longer than 5 minutes. So that's untrue. If it's done correctly, if it's done correctly, yes. And then secondly, as I advise the board,
I disagree.
If I advise the board, as I advised the board earlier, these actions in front of the wetlands are type 2 actions. EAFs are not required at all. So,
No,
but the town board may voluntarily ask for them as a tool to help out the planning board, but they're not required. They're only required for unlisted and type 1 actions.
According to the lead agency agreement that the town currently has with the DEC, it is required. I have a copy of the agreement. The agreement was actually signed by my godfather. Okay, so don't dispute the agreement that exists right now that the town has.
It's inapplicable.
Excuse me, Mr. Kiley, I'd like to finish my statement here because you're speaking incorrectly. No, I'm sorry, but you are putting out false statements. As lead agency, the town board currently must decide on the receipt of an application how to classify the project. Yes, if they classify it as it's a type 2 project, nothing else is required, but they must go through the list of the 46 listed type 2 actions in the state law before they can make that declaration. Unfortunately, the town board always seems to make these declarations after the resolution has been passed or at the time of the passing of the resolution and not at the time of receiving the application. I think I've been very, very clear on how lax the town has been on processing through these projects through the state environmental law. And if doing changes to this wetlands code is supposed to help that situation, it's not doing anything of the sort. I'd like to continue. There's just so much in the code changes. If this was only to clear up the part of clearing in the table that currently exists. That's simple. That's right. There shouldn't be any clearing allowed. But the 100 square foot exemption is still unclear. It's not really necessary. In the meeting that the planning board had in December, it was discussed that, well, if they want to take out a gazebo and put in a fire pit, that's a swap, so we don't need to worry about it. But you do, because you're taking away one thing in demolition, causing a disturbance, and putting in something new, which is causing another disturbance. So I don't understand the whole bit about we're going to get rid of demolition, and especially in the Causeway District. I mean, I realize what's built there. There's one house. But if the new owner comes in and wants to demolish that house, you're telling me they're not going to need a permit to do that? There are so many specific details that have not been addressed and do not follow the exact intent of what you're trying to do here, which is make the application easier, clarify the clearing, and take care of the 100-foot exemption. You're taking away U.S. Army Corps of Engineers out of the picture. You're taking away state environmental law out of the picture. This law needs more time to be reviewed. I blue line this thing to the hilt on things that should be changed that haven't even been discussed. So I am going to compel this town board to review every letter that they've gotten, take another look at the changes that have been made. I am going to make a request for the 20-page document that you submitted to the planning board prior to that December meeting, which I had foiled for and was denied. I'm going to request that again. And I think you all need to really decide what we're doing here, what is happening here, because this is absolutely less restrictive. And in fact, there are case laws where the town board has been sued, has been petitioned through an Article 78 by passing on this responsibility to the planning board. So there is much more research to be done if you're going to make all of these changes that you have proposed. Right now, the one that I see that's the easiest change to make is just to change the clearing part, and that's very simple. But the rest of it, changing the authority, the regulatory authority over this, from the planning board from the town board to the planning board, I think you have a few more loops to get through. And the 100.
Pam, I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you on that, and that's exactly why we started this. I mean, nothing's written in stone. As Jim mentioned, there's some things he likes, some things he doesn't like. I think we all feel that way. We just wanted to get the process started.
I'd like to clarify one point.
In that comment, that would be an indication that you would not adjourn this hearing and reschedule this, reconvene this public hearing where more of us have a little more time to review it, as well as yourselves, because there are many details that are changing the entire jurisdiction of wetlands and protecting the environment, which is what you all, ran on, basically. We all care about water, groundwater, fresh water, tidal waters. It's what the island economy has been based on and will continue to be based on in the generations to come. So I thank you for the time, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Pam. I just want to clarify, it does not eliminate the need for a demolition permit. If you're going to tear something down, you still need a demolition permit for a house, for a structure. Those require a permit with or without a wetlands application. You still have to get a permit. This doesn't eliminate the need for a demolition permit. Just clarifying that.
All right. Bob, you were.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a point. The town attorney mentioned that you would be adding something to the code saying that you would include a delineated wetlands boundary within credentialed environmentalist. That is a wetlands boundary map, or whatever you do.
Yes.
Within 5 years of submission of the application. I would suggest, first of all, I completely disagree that we should clearly not put this to the planning board. But if you're going to add something to the code regarding that, there's a loophole in the way this is worded, because if I were going to, I could do I can hire 3 different companies to do boundary, before I submit my application, pick the one that's furthest away from my building, right? And then submit that one, because it's within 5 years and it's only A. So you should require them to submit every wetlands boundary map that had been done by a credentialed environmentalist within 5 years. So the town board or the planning board, whoever gets to look at it, can see whether any shenanigans are going.
So what it is, it's a tool. Obviously, like the planning board will do a site visit and, take the survey with them and be like, if they agree with it or not agree with it. And then they'll, and they have an engineer that can go out and try to make that determination. But what I felt strongly about was to make sure it's on the survey and it's by somebody who is credentialed.
Yeah, like I said, you're leaving a loophole because in incidents in the past, the town board and the planning board, both, in the incident I was involved with, refused to hire an independent surveyor to determine that wetlands boundary, which I recommended they do.
That's a good consideration, like
Yeah, and that's up to the planning board or the town board to do at the time, but don't leave this loophole here by saying a delineated wetlands boundary, have all of them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It was a baby step, but if the town board wants to add that
They do? Let me ask you a question. Who came up with this idea? Who was the first person to come up with this idea on the town board? Who brought this to the town board?
Who brought what?
This idea of changing.
Concept of
The
transferring?
concept of transferring this from the town
Transferring
board.
or everything?
Who's the one? Did anyone here do it? Did you do it?
I think it was just more of an organic conversation as liaisons to the planning board. We've talked about it.
So was someone on the planning board, was there the impetus for having a transfer?
No.
This has been in discussion for over a year, so I don't remember where it stemmed from.
I don't know.
It just came out organic.
Correct. The town board was getting bogged down with a lot of these hearings and processes, and they wanted to do.
I think part of the problem too is that it's hard for us to dedicate the amount of time to each application that a thorough review would require, whereas the planning board has the bandwidth to do that, to dedicate the time.
But you don't need to transfer the final decision to the planning board to get that. You can tell the planning board, we expect you to do a full review. You have the authority to go ahead and get independent experts, do all your stuff. And all we're going to review is the fact that you did the process correctly. The process was properly followed.
But how would you know that?
Well, you have to trust the people that you appoint in the town. And you
No, how would the town board know if they did it correctly?
Well, the alternative is to have someone, if the planning board makes a decision, then let someone appeal to the town board that the process was not proper. They shouldn't have to file an Article 78 hearing, it's going to cost a lot of money. All right, so I think this is not the way to go. The way to go is to just change the way you view what they're doing, take into consideration that you're going to give them much higher authority, but the final decision is with you. And that is consistent with the notion that protecting our wetlands, particularly along the shoreline, is one of the most important things we can do.
So Bob, just to clarify, I want to make sure I understand your concept. So essentially it would be like a comparable example could be the WMAC's review of mooring applications.
You got it.
They approve them and then we just say, okay, they approve them.
That's exactly
That's what
right,
you're looking
because
for?
unless someone comes to you and say there's an ethics problem, or there's other kind of issue that might have come up where something was done unfairly, or a neighbor was making a big stink, whatever, then, it would come to your attention, and that's why you have a public hearing for it, and then you would make the decision, and it just.
You're saying the public hearing occurs here or with the planning?
No, the public hearing would occur here, okay? You'd have the public hearing here, but then the review is going to be, you let anyone in the public get up and say, if they have a Pam Demarest as the neighbor, they should be able to say something to the town board.
Why can't they have that at the planning board?
Because it's less transparent than having it here if this is a high priority of the town. Why don't you just have the moorings committee? Because that doesn't seem to be a big risk, where moorings are placed. That would be an applicable situation where you do delegate.
I would love
to the mooring, and let them decide and but not wetlands.
One of the things that we talked about for quite a while was with all our town boards, and there are a couple of dozen of them, committees, the minority vote. So sometimes I go to a WMAC, CAC meeting and the vote is not 7-0, not 5-0, it is 3-2 or 4-1. A minority opinion that one person had, and we've done this before, especially with something like the WMAC, where the vote was usually like a 6-1 or 5-2. What was the dissenting? What was it based on? And we entertained that. And sometimes we actually found, and you were big on this, Amber, when you brought this up, wanting the minority report and trying to understand, like, is that a legitimate, really concern? And were the other people perhaps biased?
That's an excellent point.
So that is something that, as a town board member, I would never want to relinquish.
Right, that's right. And I think that's an excellent point. If the mooring committee or the wetlands committee or the planning board comes back with a unanimous vote, that should give you a pretty high confidence that there wasn't really anything going on there, unless some neighbor comes or someone points it out. But if it's a 3-2 vote, or if it's a dissenting opinion, then it gives you an opportunity to say, well, I'm going to listen in on this one before I make my decision.
Any merit. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's when you make the decision. But there's a difference between moorings and wetlands.
I agree.
Okay, I think we're going to adjourn this meeting.
Can I just make one clarification point on the comment that was raised by someone? The town board nor the town attorney ever got sued for any secret violation whatsoever. That's not true, never happened, so I just wanted to.
All right, I'm going to make a motion, we adjourn this.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Who was that masked lady?
I'm going on vacation tomorrow.
Oh.
Like, oh, stay healthy.
The Lone Ranger.
You should have zoomed in.
I know. But this was too important, actually. So thanks for letting me just say a few things. And these are random comments. It's Stella Lagutis, and it's the Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation. First thing is, for the first hour of this meeting, we just sat through a highly, highly technical presentation. And I think you guys are selling yourselves short in terms of your expertise, because you're going to be making a decision on something having to do with wastewater and lots of data. So I think you're all pretty bright folks. So kind of outsourcing it because you don't have the expertise, I don't think that's a fair representation of who you are and what you are capable of just making sense out of kind of a lot of facts. Number two, you've been talking about administrative actions and making it easier for the applicants. Like our drinking water, I mean, we're an island. We've got wetlands everywhere. I believe, on behalf of the board, that we should be making it more difficult for people to get wetlands permits and to be able to do things within the regulated areas. So to start kind of getting rid of certain forms and making it easier, it doesn't make sense at all. And if one of the things we should be doing is streamlining, I mean, I'm just wondering where the line gets drawn in the sand, because at what point do special permits start getting outsourced for houses over 6,000 square feet? And by the way, it's not uncommon to have somebody come and ask for a wetlands permit because they want to build a house these days over 6,000 square feet. So you're not making it easier, because now you're telling them you've got to go to the planning board in order to do the wetlands, but then you still have to go to the town board to do the 6,000 square feet special permit. So I would just encourage you to take all the information and the feedback that you're getting from the public, give it some thought. It's not broken. I think there are ways, Bob raised a couple of points. There are ways that we could make it easier for you. But I think you guys add a lot of value to the process. And this was probably one of the things that the Heights Board was most concerned about, because the wetlands are so precious, and another layer is not going to hurt the process for the applicants.
What a great place to end on, Stella. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for their.
Yes, thank you for everybody's comments.
And that's all right. Like I said, nothing's written in stone. This is the beginning of the hearing. We'll adjourn this hearing. We'll continue the discussion. Okay, make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is Cozy Lane. We have a resolution for Cozy.
Well, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we have to do Cartwright first.
Yeah, there's Cartwright and Cozy Lane.
Yeah.
Who has it?
It's the last 2 or 3 pages of the packet that Linda gave you. So I have Cartwright.
Okay.
Whereas Sherman Engineering Consulting PA on December 30th, 2022 submitted a wetlands permit application on behalf of James and Cheryl Keller pursuant to Chapter 129 of the Wetland Town Code to seek approval to renovate and add an addition to an existing dwelling and reconfigure decking within the regulated area. Whereas the proposed renovation would provide a net increase in the setback to the subject wetlands boundary. Whereas the subject property is located at 56A Cartwright Road, Shelter Island, New York, which is within the C residential zoning district, within the Nearshore Overlay District with the Suffolk County Tax Map number of 700-8-3-67.2, the property. Whereas the shoreline is unhardened, whereas the subject renovation with addition and decking reconfiguration is shown on the Sherman Engineering Consulting PA proposed site plan dated January 11th, 2023, which is based on a Peconic Surveyors PC survey dated November 4th, 2019. Whereas the application was referred to the planning board.
Summarize.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Well, I should read that part and then summarize.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're available.
Let's say it's available.
Right. Whereas the application was referred to the planning board and CAC for recommendations, and said recommendations have been submitted and considered. Whereas the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation letter of non-jurisdiction has been issued for the subject property, permit ID number 1-473200696/0000002, dated March 24th, 2011, updated on October 9th, 2020. Whereas the board considered the proposed action at a public hearing pursuant to notice on February 28th, 2023, and on March 14th, 2023. And whereas this board now wishes to render a decision on this wetlands application, now therefore be resolved that the board hereby pursuant to SECRA determines that this is a type 2 action, 6 NYCRR 617.5, C11 and 12, and therefore will not have significant impact on the environment. And be it further resolved that the town board adopts the findings of the planning board and Conservation Advisory Council and concurs with the justifications and mitigation measures offered in the subject application and at the hearing. Be it further resolved that a wetlands permit for the subject construction to be completed at 56A North Cartwright Road, New York, New York, is hereby granted subject to the following conditions, which can be found at the town clerk's office or online on the resolution page. Be it further resolved that copies of this application shall be filed with the building inspector. So moved.
Second. Those in favor? Aye. Okay, Jim. Whereas this is for Cozy Lane, the demolition of that home. Whereas on June 14th, 2022, the building inspector reported to the town board that the dwelling located at 9 Cozy Lane, Shelter Island, is unsafe and in violation of several provisions of New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code. Whereas the subject dwelling has been in a similar condition since at least 2018, and the owner has failed to remedy the situation after previous notice was given. Whereas pursuant to a review of the town assessment records, the subject property is owned by William Conroy of 36 Hillside Avenue, South Portland, Maine, 04106. And whereas pursuant to section 45-4 alpha, the town code of the town board directed the senior building inspector to ensure that the notice is served on William Conroy, notifying him of unsafe conditions that exist at 9 Cozy Lane, Shelter Island, along with order to remedy said conditions within 30 days of service, or a hearing will be conducted to determine whether the town board will take measures to cure the unsafe conditions and charge the cost thereof to Mr. Conroy. Whereas the senior building inspector served said notice pursuant to section 45-4 Bravo of the town code by mailing same via certified mail to Mr. Conroy's last known address on July 7th, 2022, and posted subject dwelling with the same. And whereas the certified letter containing the notice was refused to be collected on July 11th, 2022, and whereas on Wednesday, November 9th, 2022, at 6 p.m., the town board held a public hearing pursuant to 45-4 Charlie 5 to the town code to determine whether the subject dwelling is unsafe or dangerous to the public, and if so, whether to repair, secure, or demolish same. Whereas since Mr. Conroy did not appear at said hearing, the town board elected to adjourn the hearing to March 14th, 2023. And whereas the town board retained a private engineer, Homeport Engineering PC, to inspect the dwelling and determine that the structural integrity of the same on January 12th, 2023, said engineer concluded that there is probable cause to believe that the structure is at risk of imminent collapse and recommends that the house be demolished due to the current potential risk to health and safety that it poses. Whereas even though not required to do so by the town code, the town board directed the senior building inspector to then serve notice to William Conroy by certified mail to notify him of the continuation of the public hearing set forth on March 14th, 2023, and to additionally retain the services of a process server to ensure notice. Whereas on March 3rd, 2023, William Conroy accepted the subject certified mailing. And whereas on March 6, 2023, William Conroy personally served with notice of the March 14th, 2023 hearing and the consequences of not appearing or bringing the property into compliance. And whereas of March 13th, 2023, the town engineer found that the deterioration of the structural elements had progressed since the last visit on November 9th, 2022, and the dwelling continues to be at risk of imminent collapse and is unsafe to enter. And whereas the subject hearing on March 14th, 2023, the senior building inspector substantiated the findings of both engineers. And whereas William Conroy did not attend the subject hearing nor send any communication to the town, now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby determines that the dwelling located at 9 Cozy Lane, Shelter Island, owned by William Conroy, is unsafe, poses a danger to the public, is beyond repair, requires immediate demolishing in its entirety and removal, and be it further resolved that the town highway department and Department of Public Works, in consultation with the town building department and town engineer, is hereby directed to immediately demolish and remove the subject dwelling, including the foundation located at 9 Cozy Lane, Shelter Island. And be it further resolved that any personal property that may be removed safely be done so and stored for 90 days at the town impound yard and released to William Conroy upon payment of costs, and if unclaimed, auctioned off, and the proceeds used for the reimbursement of the demolishment and removal costs. And be it further resolved that pursuant to the town code, section 45-7, the highway superintendent is hereby directed to prepare a certificate of actual expenses and file the same with the Shelter Island assessor. And be it further resolved that the assessor is hereby directed to assess such expenses against 9 Cozy Lane, Shelter Island. So moved.
Second, all those in favor? Aye.
I just have one question. We're going to remove the foundation, but are we going to fill in the hole as well? We're not going to leave a hole, right? Okay. Just wanted to confirm that for anybody listening. We'll fill in the hole.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Good point. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion. We close the special meeting and reconvene the work session. And I'm going to have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, I think we're going to skip the board member reports because we have to interview the clerk, but I will open a bit of public comments.
This is regarding, I'm on the list, by the way, so put my name down. This is regarding the wastewater treatment plant, and the town engineer is here. This really was for Mr. Lombardo. So I was listening carefully to what he was saying. This part of it as best I could. It's not easy, as you know, it's complicated. He talked about at one point a net reduction in nitrogen. He said to a net reduction of 1,100 pounds per year, okay, at one point. He also said, I'm not trying to trip him up on numbers here, by the way. He also said there, at another point, he said there'd be a reduction from 1,964 pounds of nitrogen per year to 27 pounds of nitrogen per year. And that is 1.4%, which is where he got that.
It was a net reduction of 1,100 pounds.
Yes, that's
And
right.
then that brought it down to the 27.
Right, I think the supervisor actually asked, that's net of what we have today. Right?
I think so. Joe can confirm that.
I have to
Okay, this is.
proceed to the question and then we'll figure
Okay.
out which numbers.
Okay, so what my question would be is, okay, if that is what we're going from today to the wastewater treatment plant at Manwaring is down to a 1.4% or to 1,100 pounds, I'm not sure which is the right thing.
27 pounds, not 1,100.
27.5, I thought it was.
27.5.
Yeah.
That was from 1,964 pounds per year. So the 1,100, I don't know where it came from. I couldn't find it on.
Pounds per, or gallons. I think the other was gallons, wasn't it? Or-
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Versus pounds.
But it's definitely a big reduction.
Yes.
It would be nice to clarify those numbers because I think it's important to clarify that because my understanding is that this is not about whether, the question as to whether to do the Manwaring plant is not about whether to do nothing for the Manwaring plant. There's been presentations made by Mr. Gobler, I believe, or whatever, suggesting an alternative plan where you do these on-site septic systems. So really the question is, what is the net reduction from those systems to the wastewater treatment plant? That's apples to apples.
Right.
Because currently, you're not going to do nothing, right? So it's misleading to suggest that it's going to be a 1.4% or 90 whatever percent reduction that amounts to be, when in fact, you're really comparing what the localized school plus these other three sites or whatever it is. That's what the comparison should be. Number two, and more importantly, and this is crucial, he said, and you can go look at the tape, because I haven't looked at the video yet. He's talked about, well, you could calculate the cost per pound per year reduction, okay? But he said that's not applicable. And I wrote down why. Why wouldn't the cost per pound per year reduction not be applicable? Because if the AI solution, the local solution, I'll call it, right, is $1 million plus whatever the school costs, which is what I heard today, I don't know what the number is, versus some higher number to go to the Manwaring plant, okay? If you take the true benefit of reduction of nitrogen, forget about all the pharmaceuticals or whatever, but for the nitrogen thing, we have numbers here. You take that smaller number and you have a smaller number in costs for the local plant than the Manwaring plant, you may have two numbers where the cost per pound per year of doing Manwaring is so much higher than the cost per pound of reduction you're going to get on the local. It would be a no-brainer not to do the Manwaring and to do the local one. So he said he didn't think it was applicable. And I just thought it was absolutely applicable, okay? You don't want to make a decision based upon the wrong comparison and not even considering cost. This is a cost-benefit analysis. This is not like, because we wouldn't be driving cars if there was a cost-benefit analysis that valued human life to infinite. You know, this is too risky. It's too risky to come out here, right? So you always have to do cost-benefit analysis, and I don't think that was done, you know, in that presentation, and I haven't seen it anywhere, and maybe you have an answer.
Should we start at the top, Bob? That was a,
Start at the bottom if you want.
At the bottom, that's fine, okay. I didn't know you were such an astute numbers guy, so I'm happy we can.
Look, I'm a lawyer, not an accountant.
Okay, all right. So cost-wise, I think what Pio perhaps was getting at in terms of not about evaluating the cost per pound was really in the context of there are other regulatory and complexities to this choice between individual systems versus the centralized plant. And some of those are the number of variances that are required for individual systems. Some of them have to do with the valuation of putting nitrogen in the ground here in the center where we know it has more of a negative impact on our neighbors. Those are difficult to assign cost to, but they're considerations that make a simple analysis like dollars per pound nitrogen removed sort of irrelevant in the broader consideration. The other thing that's very relevant that you talked about is the efficacy of IA systems. And one important distinction, besides the fact that IA systems would still contribute wastewater right here in the center, is that they can't achieve the same level of treatment as a centralized system does in terms of removing nitrogen. When we did price that out, which was part of the initial engineering report, and we do make it apples to apples, the cost is about the same. And that's simply on the perspective of looking at nitrogen. However, beyond that, one system has the capability to enhance treatment beyond what the IA system could do. So that's when we're talking about pharmaceuticals and other emerging contaminants. It's not practical or cost effective to do that on IA systems. So at its very base level, cost per nitrogen, dollar per pound, comparable cost, and not factoring in yet the added benefits of additional treatment from the centralized system. So
I don't believe you, because you haven't shown me numbers to back up what you just said.
the numbers are included in the previous engineering report. So you're right to say that they weren't in this addendum. They weren't in this addendum, but they had been calculated. In fact, there's a full cost estimate based off of apples to apples comparison for treatment. If we looked at the individual system approach and made them equivalent treatment, it's unfair to your point to say, put in an IA system, what's the cost of it? If it doesn't give you the same output, the treatment level's not the same. So that's an unfair assessment.
The other side of this is that there are costs to the town. What you have just been through over the past, forget about the dollar costs. Think about the political costs that the people who are distrustful or worried about that there's some other agenda here, or the fact that you're going through all of this process for something that's not going to provide you with the marginal benefit that you're saying that it is, and you have no guarantee. Let's
dig into that comment a little bit. I think actually what's being discovered here from this analysis is that the difference, the benefit is significant. It's way beyond that marginal difference that you just described. The data here, the modeling, the studies are showing that it's actually quite far apart. The benefits, the advantage cost-wise and treatment-wise for a centralized system far outweigh what we're considering for alternatives. And that, I think, is what's becoming indisputable. Not open really for debate.
I just don't think it's been transparently. I mean, there was comment earlier about the presentation that was made earlier by the board. I think it was supervisor in jest, saying that was tough to listen to because it was very complex and whatever. And you did a good job of trying to explain it, but we really need to see the numbers behind what you're saying. And I don't think that's been presented to the town. And I think there's a lot of skepticism. There are cost overruns on these things. There are unintended consequences. A lot of time was spent to sort of downplay the harm to the area where the water would be flowing. Okay.
Well, let's dig into that a second. Downplay. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think there was a lot of time spent today on a separate presentation on saying that, it's really not going to be harming. There are people who own property over there who beg to differ.
And we have the proof that it's not going to affect them.
All right, do you have the proof that it's going to detrimentally affect?
Yes.
Let's say there's a 90%, let's say there's a 96%, I don't know what the percentage of reduction of nitrogen these days, on whether it's a commercial system or residential system or whatever, but there's going to be a over 90% reduction in nitrogen. If you did these separate IA systems.
That's not true.
No. Not going to be over 90%.
Bob, I think we're going to continue this next week. Okay, that was the intent to,
I think
the public digest everything and we'll talk about it next week.
All right.
Joe's going to be back.
I'll be back. Yeah, we could do this again. In fact, I've started
Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I'll be back.
I've also been offering opportunities for meeting directly with particular organizations. And so if you'd like to do that, we can do that as well.
I'll be happy to meet with you myself, or have someone else with more knowledge about this than me. But I think you should try to put those numbers together that show actual, true apples to apples comparison, because what was presented today was the current situation versus doing the man-mering without considering the separate IA system. And I think that was highly misleading.
Okay, I would just reiterate that that's not what the scope of this analysis was for. That work had been done in the previous engineering reports, which were part of the public discussion. So I can understand from your perspective, you'd say, hey, I didn't hear anything about that today. But to be fair and to pay respect to the scope of work here, that wasn't what was included.
But that's what was presented, and that's
what was presented was the addendum, not the whole entire plan.
Yeah, but it was misleading to present it because it led me to believe that you hadn't even considered he even said it publicly that he didn't think it was a relevant number. You're saying, well, there's a bunch of other considerations. I'm saying
you're starting to jump around now, Bob, and it's difficult to follow which number you're referring to. But what I think you can really hone in here is that this modeling effort demonstrates an issue of positive versus negative benefit that's indisputable for these two projects.
No, I think-
And I'm happy to engage you directly, if you can bring.
I would like to say one closing comment here. The town board felt so strongly about this project. We actually got 3 different grants to support what we've done so far, which shows a lot of support from above about the merits of this project. And we're talking about WQPRP, we're talking about New York State Wastewater Engineering Planning Grant, we're talking about another large sum of money from WQPRP, because the people that actually looked at this project from outside the town saw a lot of merit in it. So we were lucky to be able to secure funds to be able to do this, with the idea that we will always have a plan B, perhaps, if this did not work for some reason. But I thought it was incumbent upon the board to at least, the opportunity comes along once, maybe, I don't know, I want to say a lifetime, but once in a long time, to take advantage of looking at a really good solution to reduce nitrogen here in the center of town. So we went with that. We really wanted to pursue that. If for some reason that this town board is convinced that that's not the way to go, then we do have a plan B. But I think we got a lot of support from people up above saying they encouraged us to look in this direction.
All right, I didn't mean to suggest it was improper to look into alternatives, okay? But I think that, I don't think that in the town today, I think there's a significant part of this community who don't believe this is the right thing to do. And there's something in their gut telling them that, and they also hired experts to come in. I'm not part of that group, who think otherwise. And I think they presented their case, I just think this might be a big mistake.
So the conversation's going to continue. We have 2 candidates coming in for interviews, so I kind of want to keep rolling towards getting them in since they've been patiently waiting.
And this whole presentation was really just a response to Sylvester Manor's question of, will this have a negative impact on our wells? And so all the studies that were done were to see if this would in fact have an impact on our wells. And
That was the intent, but I don't think it was understood that way, given what was said. So, thank you.
We have another week to continue.
I was going to say 2 weeks.
Good luck with that.
We have 2 people. I see Kim Bonstrom, you've had your hand up. The request that I would make, Jerry had to step out for a second. The one request I would make is it has to do with the wastewater treatment or the wetlands application. We're going to continue the wastewater discussion next week, and the wetlands is adjourned, so we will pick that up again in a public setting too.
Yeah.
So with that, do you have a new topic to discuss, Kim? And you're on mute.
I'm sorry, you asked me, the only question I had a question for Joe. Will he be taking any questions via email today or during the next week prior to the meeting next week? Because I know he's
Pam,
gonna.
you can email me anytime. We can have this discussion offline or next week's work session, whichever's best for you.
Okay, and then I was just curious about the grocer report. Do you know when you're going to have that in hand and have that posted so that we can see that prior to that meeting 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, that's going to, the public, I guess, meeting for that report will be 2 weeks from today. And, we're expecting the final report will be available and posted for public review in the days leading up to it. I don't have a copy of it yet. They're still finalizing it. So, expect certainly by that Friday at the latest, likely the day before. So, Friday before the Tuesday work session.
Okay. And the only other question I wondered is, I know you did a coordinated review for this secret analysis. Do you know who they designated as the lead agency for this review?
That's all going to be squared away at the grocer presentation.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. And happy birthday, Joe.
Thank you.
Looks good for 25.
All right, Joe.
Kate, did you?
Oh, Kate, you had a question?
You were sitting here. No,
I was later, Kate.
signature seat too, so
Yeah.
you're just see me there. So yeah, make this really quick. Just want to acknowledge and accept the idea of quarterly reports on our progress, successes, failures. Although we're well into March, so maybe it'll be more triannual as opposed to quarterly. And just trying to
reiterate, if I hadn't already said, I thought I did, but all the data that we collect, it will belong to, in our monitoring and stuff, it will belong to CCE and the town. You know, it's the shared information that we're collecting. And to clarify, CCE, like we still have not received any details from PEP on their proposed project for here. But, you know, we have had a long history of collaborating with them and we don't see any reason why that would change. You know, again, information sharing, that's the nature of the scientific field, is for constantly sharing.
I will try to secure that information for you.
Yeah, Chris Pickrell had been trying,
I think they were in the process of finalizing them, by the way, what their plans are for 2023 and 2024.
and so when would the official vote with the reso be?
A week from today.
I think it's
Yes,
in rest this.
At town board or work session?
It'll be at the
Work session.
work session, and then we'll go into a special meeting.
Oh,
For
like
this.
today?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
I think you can rest
Yes.
assured that was
Yes.
correct, so.
And I will just do one super quick final speech. Just thanks for the support from town board members, the water quality, like the WQI advisory board and any community members. And I can't voice enough my appreciation for being told and shown that my work is valued. The little things. But also speaking as an island resident, thanking the town for identifying that water quality improvement is an important issue and committing to take action. Not everybody does both, and I'm happy to see that on many, you're doing that in many facets. And the greatest success comes from a multifaceted approach, which means, yes, like directing attention to wetlands protection and large and small scale septic upgrading and restriction or enforcement of pesticide, herbicide, fertilizer use, and restoration of marine habitats. So with educational opportunities that inspire the continuation of that. And whether you are ending your term or continuing to serve, this can be part of your legacy, you know? And by supporting my project, you are saying that water quality and the health of our bays and harbors is important. And by what I've heard today, your constituents would agree. So that's it. Thanks, Kate. Thank you.
Thanks.
See you next week.
Thank you very much for your.
We'll be here.
Anyone else? All right, then we'll have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?